Dude, hell yeah.
Hey, what's up, man?
Say, yo, I know that Pano is kind of blowing up 30 people in the room, but sometimes when there's that many people, can't really get a good word in, and I find that gets like it's just topic to topic, it gets derailed so fast.
Yeah, yeah, they won't. Yeah, it does, huh? Because somebody injects something else and it doesn't answer the question that was asked.
Totally. It literally, by the time you brought up normativity of science, like six other topics were brought up by the time I talked. And then it was like, yeah, it's just kind of what happens when you got too many people in there that aren't really like on the same wave of discipline. It's hard to organize everyone talking over each other and stuff.
Yeah, yeah, I agree, man. But
You brought
what's
that question up, right? Did you ask the question about the normativity of science? You did, right?
I did, yeah, yeah.
Well,
Because
so yeah,
I think
I
Fan
want to
made
hear
an
your thought.
argument that science, give us morality and is able to point out what's right and wrong. I'm like, how does that even make any sense?
Yeah, like obviously they didn't understand the term normativity there, which is fine. I don't, it is kind of a weird term. It does my impulse is to assume that it means like norms as well. It's just a metaphysics term though. But like, do you think there are any normative claims in science? Because I would say one would be like you should use logic to get to the truth.
I think I think it precedes the scientific method, right? So logic is something that we need to accept before we even dive into the scientific realm, right?
True, exactly. That's I guess what I'm saying. Like you'd
Yeah,
have to accept it. It's kind of a normative thing outside of science that's saying like you should use this in order to achieve science. Like if you don't use it, is that kind of a normative claim? I don't know. Seems normative somewhat.
yeah, I would agree that yeah, science is making a normative claim on. I've never thought about that.
Like for
That
instance,
logic should be.
if someone didn't use it, it would be frowned upon. Like if someone tried to make an irrational claim for science, everyone would like frown upon it and be like, "Yeah, you should use logic. This seems irrational."
You know what? Never thought about that, but that's 100% true. Because yeah, if you make some crazy claim that it doesn't follow the data, you're just like people are just gonna look at you funny, like, well, what are you talking about? This doesn't follow the scientific method that we're pursuing. Yeah, I've never thought about that, but yeah, it does make that normative claim that logic is supreme. Logic is something that we should strive to be in alliance with, aligned with.
Yeah, the other interesting thing there is like admitting our bias. Like, but normativity has a lot of this issue with like bias or like interpretation. So for if a scientist wasn't able to pronounce that normative claim, that seems bias. It seems like unbiased and scientific to be like, hey, by the way, my normative standard is logic or like whatever you want to view your normativity through. But if like you are unable to do that and you say, oh, science has no normative claims, you sound biased. It's like, oh, you think science is just alleviated of this orientation towards the true and the good. Yet you can't, right? You can't prove logic with logic. You're holding this as a baseline assumption of apparently moral aesthetic.
Yeah, but then that would even strengthen our argument that these um
Yes,
these
yes,
laws of logic are universal. They're
yes,
not subjected to the individual, right?
exactly, exactly. And that subjectivity, see, that's why it escapes the subjectivity. If you're able to point out the methodology right there, you're able to say, like, my normative claim is through this lens. Or if you say it's through the rational lens, immediately your term can be falsified. You are using rationality to defend it, to defend the methodology of rationality itself. Whereas what
Mhm.
we're witnessing in these irrational conversations, people using rationality without the baseline orientation, that subjective nature, right? They don't understand that actually the methodology is objective. We can measure whether someone's claim is falsifiable. Me putting forward the claim that logic is my normative claim highlights someone else to critique it. It's like, hey, if you're not a rational scientific thinker and you're more superstitious or gullible or that kind of thing, that's totally fair to like highlight that.
So you're almost saying like, hey man, this is this is my normative claim. I want you to push it and point out my biases, right?
Exactly.
Like you're wanting
Exactly.
people to like, hey, dude, if I have biases, please point them out because I don't want to have biases. I want to have rationality over biases.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's crazy, bro. That is crazy because that is true. Um, but how
It's
does
weird
this?
how I'm sorry to cut you off. What's up? You say.
But ask me this question, man. How does scientific how does science somehow generate so much atheism? How do help me understand how that makes any sense? Because
Yes.
I don't understand. I've kept pushing back because most of the time I hear people just make that claim. You know, science and atheism go hand in hand, and a lot of theists
Yes.
don't push back. You know, they're like, oh yeah, yeah, whatever. But I try to push back every single time somebody makes that claim. I'm like, no, dude, science does not validate atheism or God. You know, I think science, it's kind of like you said, it's an unbiased approach at truth. So
Yeah, no,
so
well, I would say it does have an element of spirituality to this point you're asking.
yeah,
Why does science produce so many atheists? Well, I don't know if it's that or it's the other way around. So many atheists are attracted to academia and science, like atheist types. I don't know which one it is, but regardless, it's this orientation. It's like no matter what you learn, if you don't have that proper orientation, you're going to learn it through a filtered lens. So it's an orientation problem. It's that the lessons being taught in science or in academia or in institutions aren't about the orientation, right? No one
mm,
gets oriented into math class. It's just here's math class. Now we're at 2 plus 2, now we're at multiplication, now we're at division. No one has that orientation of like where you start. No one
yeah.
gets to ask those baseline questions of like what symbolic logic is and how it does function through a spiritual lens. That's why institutions pump out atheists. If you
How do you,
start from if you start from the spiritual position, as in like look at how logic and rationality harness humility. See, you can't produce a valid claim without humility.
that's true.
Your ability to falsify your terms and check your vocabulary, check your terminology is that falsifiability of your theorem is the very validity that science is harnessed on. So there is a moral and ethical assumption before we make any mathematical remarks or before we make any assumptions. There's a fundamental one about truth and spirituality, about the good and the true. And those things aren't empirical. So when we go into a class, a school, an institution, and we learn about empiricism, that's going to make us more of an atheist because we're looking
Mhm.
around for evidence of God. Without this orientation problem, it's like, yeah, but you don't have evidence for your orientation. Your original assumption, your original foundational belief, it's an axiom. It also doesn't require that, right? This is the important part. It doesn't require evidence. For you to go around searching for evidence of God is like requiring, right? It's like a prerequisite that's not actually required. You're searching. This is like an anthropomorphizing of the term God. It's again It's an invalid statement. It's an invalid statement. You're defining the term God, and then you're just making an assumption based on that. You're not deductively looking at the term rationally from a standpoint of like religious history and like the ineffability of wisdom, like wisdom beyond words, those kinds of things, like morals, like stories, narratives, wisdom beyond words. Like science has nothing to say about these things until it actually highlights its own assumptions. It's like the blasphemy of science holds it back. If it were just to highlight its own blasphemy and say, hey, this is where we're kind of biased. You look, we're using the scientific method to show this is our bias orientation. It would do so much better. It would flourish. But it hides itself from its own. It's like a mirage. It's trying to facade itself and pretend it's something that it isn't. Oh, we're kind of atheist. We're kind of agnostic. It's like, no, you're just scared of the religious trauma in the culture. The reality is logic and science are rooted in spirituality and religion. It's a lie to say that they're at war with one another.
How do you bring that? How do you make that point, man? Like I've struggled to, I've attempted to make this argument, because I made a point. Hey, man, the only thing that God is trying to say, it's just making a normative claim that goodness, what we see as good is nothing more than the well-being of individuals in the community, right? And I'm like I've struggled to understand. Like I get the pushback because there's a lot of Christians that take a more aggressive approach at laws and morality and stuff. And but how do you make that point? How do you help them understand that the error of their stance or their logic?
I try to come at it from the rational standpoint because I assume an atheist doesn't want dogma, doesn't want doesn't want my superstitious beliefs. So if I start reading off scripture or the
Yeah,
historicity of the Bible, they're not going to be impressed with that. I try to go with their route. They believe in logic and science. So I try to prove, I'm trying to work through with them to prove science without some sort of axiom, some sort of baseline foundation of reasoning. If they're able to at least recognize the limitations of logic, that any inductive assertion is going to be tentative at best, and that deduction is a spiritual process because it makes us question our own terminology, and you can only do that if you're humble. Like, so that's where I try to get them with it. I'm like, hey, look, if you don't understand that logic and rationality are a spiritual process, I think you don't fully wield the tool. We have a lot of academics who, even with PhDs that I've talked to in logic, that I completely disagree with them about their definition of deduction, which I find
yeah.
fascinating, right? How could someone, and they of course just call me uneducated, but I do think that deduction plays an important part in the full circle of how logic functions in our spirituality. Deduction is all about questioning yourself, questioning your terms and falsifying your terms. This is practical in my everyday life, not in academia, right? Deduction is when I'm arguing with my girlfriend and we get bogged down on a term and I'm like, "No, you're being abusive." And she's like, "No, you're being or whatever the word is. You lied,
Yeah.
right?" "No, I didn't lie. I told the truth." Well, we could debate all day about this term lying or truth or cheating or whatever the term is, but in order for me to be deductively rational, I have to question my own assumption of those terms. And
So that's
that's
where
where
the
the humility.
humbleness comes in, right? That's where you make
Yes,
that connection
yes,
of spirituality.
yes. And
Yeah.
someone who is irrational will trudge forward with their assumptions and say, "No, I know I'm right. You're wrong. You cheated." And they will never humble out. They will never empathize with their opposition. They will never question their own terms. And that's the definition of irrational thinking. Ironically, you could be, see, this is where it's weird. You can convince yourself you're right, right? And you could be fairly true. But then there's this whole other, like, it's exactly the cup half empty, half full dilemma. No matter how accurately you describe the cup as half empty, it's still also half full. And so
Yeah.
this juxtaposition of how rationality, that's how rationality functions. It's a symbolic balance of terms. There's not just one term in a proposition. You have to have multiple terms and balance them together like that against each other to derive any meaning. And without this deductive approach, it's constantly just unhumble assertions of people blasphemy. It's like it's the most blasphemous use of the tool. They're just driving home points to get W's without, and all that's showing is it's exposing their inability to utilize the actual method of like humble conversation.
Yeah. No, I agree, man,
Yeah,
because I've noticed that like when I talk to an atheist that's really like in pursuit of truth and knowledge, I see them being more charitable in our conversations, you know, where they're trying to understand what's being argued versus other people that are just like trying to get that W, trying to, make you trip or it's just I notice a huge difference between the conversations. And that's that
absolutely,
humility,
man.
right? That humility. You're actually not just trying to win conversations. You're actually in pursuit of knowledge and truth.
Yes, and I love the Christian phrase, "The truth will set you free." I realized it was one of the things that made me take on the name Logic Troll, which I've had for like, man, almost a decade probably now on all my platforms. Because
Yeah.
the truth will set you free. I was obsessed with this as a kid, never wanted to lie, always wanted to tell the truth. But eventually, what that gets you into is trouble because you speak so many truths that well, eventually you do start going a little bit psycho because you question what is true. Is anything true? I'm trying to be honest, but you get caught up in lies without even meaning to be caught up in lies because you're trying to tell the truth, then someone questions you on the truth. And if you're not willing to question your own assumptions of what you thought, you're going to actually fall down again a lie. You're pursuing the truth with your good intentions, but without questioning that method, you will still pursue a lie. And so this saying, the truth will set you free, is perfect because the more obsessed with getting to the perfect truth, the more locked in a cage you'll be. You'll be forever in handcuffs. You'll never get there. You'll never ever get there. You will be so distraught and so irritable and so, right, locked in a cage, you will never be able to communicate with anyone. The
Hey,
only way to have a communication is to let go and like a bit of this obsession with the absolute truth, especially in your own assumptions.
what do you do when? Because I've heard somebody make a statement like, I think it was Shark. Uh, I think it was him. He said that the truth is unobtainable. What do you say stuff like that? What's your thoughts on that?
I don't think it's unattainable. I just think it's undescribable. I think we can experience the truth all the time. We're confronting the truth. The problem is describing it. Symbology is not objectivity. So whenever we distill reality down into a symbol, that's going to be distorted. And so describing reality to someone else or fully realizing someone else's description, that will always be limited. But that's again just the rational method. Um, I think we do experience the truth all the time. It's not in the right. I don't think it's in an image or like in an abstraction. I think the truth is like an object hitting us.
Well, obviously they're gonna make a distinction, right? So subjective truth, or like truth subjective to individual, is there, right? We experience it all the time. But when we talk about objective truth, I think that's what they bring up as something that we can't really ever understand.
Well, the way I would say it is we can't ever symbolize it. An
Wait,
object, by definition, can never be a symbol.
yeah.
Right? A symbol is an abstraction. So the moment we take an object and we symbolize it, well, now we're representing the object. So the symbol can never be the object. And that's so whenever we're thinking in symbols. Whenever we're talking in symbology. This is why rationality highlights the limitation of symbology. Hey, symbology is limited. Like the object of truth is never going to be arrived at through symbology, of course, right? But that's not a bad thing. That's just actually that's quite enlightening. It's like so now that we know that, we can use our symbols way more efficiently. We don't have to be so bogged down in dogma. We don't have to be obsessed with the truth of a symbol. This is also where I think the cross is a very important symbol um, for our psychology because it relates to deductive logic, like the cross and the Cartesian plane, the coordinate system, the grid system. It's all an intersection of a juxtaposition of lines. There's two intersecting lines, and I think that that is an important symbol for truth, because if truth can never be symbolized, right? If an object can never be fully symbolized, then we need a symbol that's like fluid. We need a symbol that's like going to capture the most amount of uncertainty in a way that's non-dogmatic, and the cross does that. The cross is the most one of the most, or I would say the most accurate symbol we have, because it deductively eliminates all the space around the origin. There's just one
Ooh.
intersection. The two lines intersect at one precise point. Now that point is impossible to actually measure, right? Because it's illusory. It's apparently right infinitely in the page. We can never find the actual perfect cross. We have to make an assumption that it's there. We just have to assume it's there. The cross happened, and all the
Ooh.
other space is deductive. All the other space can be counted, and the origin is the only space that we're assuming. Beyond that, we can calculate everything very accurately. This is how we do data analysis or calculus. This is how we graph anything in math. We use the coordinate method, or one that's one of the systems, at least one of the most accurate systems. We use the coordinate method to to draw out curvatures in space. And and that's due to this symbology of the cross. Without the cross, like if imagine a grid of circles, it wouldn't work. Like a cross, this cross is getting right to your question about truth and how a symbol can never fully, right, accurately predict space and time and truth and objects. But through the deductive method, we can eliminate our uncertainty, and through that humility, we can map things quite clearly. Like, for instance, the coordinate method is what allowed us to map the coastlines. Before we had this mapping method,
Yeah.
maps were fairly arbitrary. They were based on experience, and the distances on the maps weren't calculatable to someone who wasn't territorially familiar. They didn't know the
Yeah.
territory, right? You could spend 4 decades mapping the territory. You hand the map to me, and now I'm lost because I don't know what that tree, what that path you're referencing is, right? But the grid
Yeah.
method actually allowed the mapping to be a universal because it allows you to zoom in and out of the details. It's the grid method isn't a map. It's a standard for a map. It's an orientation for mapping. It's
Yeah.
pre-mapping, like the orientation for logic. It's like if you use the grid method, then we can be as detailed into the space as we want, or as less detailed. We can abstract all the way out to the whole coastline, or we can go into a really small 1 kilometer area and map every little detail. Whatever vantage point or scope you choose, right? But that scopeability, that's the whole issue going on here with people in their rationality. They're
Yeah.
locked into a scope. They don't have that orientation of basic symbolic logic that allows them to distance themselves from objective truth. And that's why their conversations get so bogged down in like aggressive, irritability, those
Yeah.
kinds of things. And I do think this conversation, if you can be calm enough and describe it to like an atheist, I do think this can penetrate and get through to people for sure. But it takes a
No,
while.
definitely. No, this is a different approach, man. And I was just thinking about this. It's pretty cool because I think that's what I've been doing. I've been deductively trying to search for truth, right? And I'm looking at stuff. I'm like, no, this doesn't make sense, you know. So I'm just eliminating some of the stuff that just doesn't make sense, right? And by eliminating
That's
stuff, I
it.
think I'm getting closer to the truth.
Oh, and,
That's
and
that's
you're
kind of
gonna
cool.
notice now, dude, how many people don't use that method. Most people get to the truth by stacking assumptions. Oh,
Yeah,
here I found one. Here I found your methodology of working backwards, eliminating things that are wrong, and always sort of being tentative about the conclusion. That's deduction. And I'm telling you, articulating that, even to a mathematician, even to someone with a PhD, has led me into a bit of like nihilism. It's actually depressing how few people can articulate these ideas, bro. And I found a few authors who really grounded me on these concepts, but again, they are not popularized. Most people are not familiar with this. It's like it's totally a drop ball of our education system or something. I don't know. It's great. It makes me a little nihilistic. I have hope. I'm an optimistic person, but this
yeah.
particular topic is like overwhelming for me, for sure.
That's crazy, man. That's pretty cool, dude. I've never really listened to you. You know, most of the time I got lost with some of the stuff that you said, but now that we're having conversations, I'm kind of like understanding what you're saying, and I think I agree with it. I think I've been doing
Dude,
similar stuff as you.
uh, the inductive and deductive words throw people off, just like normativity or any other word. That's why I try not to use these words, but it does seem like for instance, deduction is a word we use all the time. When you deduce money out of your bank account, what are you doing? You're subtracting money. You're not
Yeah,
adding money, you're deducting. So people who think deduction is about adding up assumptions to get to a conclusion, it's like, what are you thinking deduction means? Deduction is about falsifying and eliminating theories.
yes,
It's about removing assumptions, highlighting variable terms, has nothing to do with trudging forward to a conclusion. It's about working backwards from a conclusion. If my girlfriend and I are arguing about a conclusion, we need to stop and work backwards. Our cycle, our negative spiral into an argument will depend on us stopping the inductive flow of assumptions and working backwards. From the moment you do that, I'm telling you, the conversation becomes comical, lighthearted. Both parties start taking responsibility. It become
yeah,
you start realizing how empathetic you need to be because your partner is actually right, and you realize how wrong you are. Those kinds of things. Those realizations, though, I'm telling you, this is what the Stoics and what the Greeks all were writing about when they're talking about logic, because they were utilizing it in their everyday life and they're utilizing it in public discourse. And they knew that the W's actually came from eloquence and humility and right generosity, those kinds of things. It does not come from trampling on your opposition with vocabulary and intimidation and those kinds of things.
No, that I agree, man. No, that's cool. Hey, would you be able to share some of the authors that you're reading? I definitely want to start reading some of the
Oh, for
stuff.
sure. I'm pretty bad at reading, so I listen to all audiobooks. But
Okay.
fascinatingly, a lot of these concepts have related to like economics for me. So I'm really into like crypto and trading and economics, but it's through these authors. So Nassim Taleb is like my favorite one. Nassim
Okay.
Taleb.
Can you?
He's a famous
Yeah.
mathematician and economist.
You message that? Can you send that in a message, please? I
Yeah.
don't have anything to write, but yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I'll send you a bunch of links, man. But yeah, I'm telling you, like the first few minutes, he'll go immediately into logic, deduction, the limitation of science, the all of it. He'll go into, the hysteria of academia, all of it, and he talks about how he makes money off of all this. That's the most interesting part, because you're aware of this. You're in a financial opportunity. That's one of the other things. If you truly can be emotionally stable and be aware of the mathematical implications of deduction, you can leverage it to make money.
Yeah, no, that would make 100% sense because especially in the crypto community, the crypto it's all about getting rid of the emotion, and just thinking analytically and processing things in a
Exactly.
way that are sound. Because how
Exactly.
easy it is to buy from emotion, sell from emotion. It's a recipe for disaster. You
The
know.
only way a person can get rich is to basically be, according to most people's understanding of rationality, a psychopath. It's not about being emotionally disconnected and unempathetic, but yeah, it's basically about looking at things so analytically that you do become mathematically a bit of a psychopath, detached from proof so much. For instance, the news means nothing to me when I look at charts. I am not trying to predict. When someone sends me a DM of, oh, Tesla sells a stock, blah blah blah. I find that shit hilarious.
Yeah.
It's all technical analysis. I do not care what anyone's opinion is. It's a raw data analysis. I look at the chart, I make my decision. It has nothing to do with like news or someone's opinion or anything like that, or forecasting. It has nothing to do with me predicting the market. You think about
I
how
mean, it's
psychopathic you
impossible
have
to
to
do
be.
that. Yeah.
You have to buy when the price goes down, and then you have to sell when the price goes up. Well, that's a psychopath, because most
Yeah.
people, when the price goes up, they get greedy, they hold. When the price gets down, they get fearful and they sell. It's almost
Exactly.
impossible to get so confident in this approach to deduction. And I'm telling you, the ancients of the past who had great wealth, they understood these notions and they wrote about them. Nassim Taleb's a modern writer, but he references all the ancients. He references all the ancients in what he talks about because they've all written about these approaches. Ancient warriors on the battlefield, they were all about stoicism because their rationality, their technique with a weapon, first of all, had to be defensive. The
Yeah.
more aggressive and oppressive and offensive you are, the more you're going to get chopped down. It was a defensive approach, and then secondary, it was very aggressive, right? You're aggressive in your defense,
Yeah.
so much so that the moment someone's in your territory, like their head's off, type thing.
It's funny, dude, because
And yeah,
I put my kids in boxing, and they're teaching all that stuff. All these like moves that you have to prepare. Like controlling the distance. Um, being able to like keep your eyes at the opponent and be able to like see like when the muscle moves. Just having all this like knowledge of like of not of like um how do I explain this? It's like having knowledge of what to do before things happen. At a moment's just at a drop of a hat. If somebody
yes,
steps in, you know exactly what to do now. Like it's just like
yeah,
muscle memory. Like,
this ability to be calm when you're panicking. Like put yourself in a really panicking, horrible situation and now calm down. Calm down, right?
yeah.
Those kinds of those because you're only going to be able to react like you're saying. You're only going to be able to have those quick reactions or know what to do if you're calm. If you're worked up, you're going to make the wrong decision. You're going to be the oppressor. You're going to be the one making an offensive move when you should be on the defense or whatever. So your mind is like the ultimate tool, right? And the whole fight could be stopped if your mind's in the right place. You could run away. You could, right? You don't have to fight. If you could just get out of your own mind, your own anger, perhaps you could, who knows how much you could prevent, right?
So hey, let me ask you a question, man. So your background, were you Christian or were you an atheist?
I was brought up atheist. Atheist. Both my parents are highly academic, so I was, I went to boarding school and then university. So I was washed in the atheism and agnosticism. Ironically, the boarding school I went to had a 3 day a week like chapel service, but it was Anglican, so it's pretty moderate, and it was basically just a school assembly. It was not they did not do there was a bit of singing and stuff, but they rarely read from the Bible or anything like that. So this it was just because it was such a rich old school, they still had the chapel, but they just
Yeah,
used it as so no, I was basically raised none of
that's
that
crazy.
school like everyone at that school, even the preacher was like basically an atheist type shit. All the kids were
Mm.
atheists and everything. So mostly I'm talking a little bit for everyone, but I would say 90%. I mean, when I graduated, everyone was of the mindset they're going to university, and to be a scientific mind, yeah, God is irrational. I mean, one of my best memories is on day like 2 at university. A friend that I made started debating a random dude at the cafeteria who alleged that he was, Christian, and immediately it was like heated at the table. It was
Yeah.
like one of my first experiences at university.
Wow.
Yeah. So
That's
yeah,
so what happened? Like, how did you? Because I was atheist for a while
yeah,
too. How did you
yeah.
change?
Well, like I said, I'm always really passionate about I love learning. I love school. I love logic and science, but that basically arrived me at a bit of nihilism, questioning what is true, what is reality, what is good, is the good really unprovable? Does my opinion on the
Mm.
good, is it really just subjective taste? It has nothing to say about truth. Like I didn't feel right about these concepts, and they made me fairly depressed. And thank God, basically, I came across people like Jordan Peterson who saved me and put me onto the Logos, told me about controlling my emotions and the relevance of the psychological impacts of the Bible and archetypal thinking and Carl Jung and all those great things. And from there, I just took those references and ran. I mean, Peterson gets a lot of slack. Everyone hates on him, and fair enough, he's got some outlandish ideas, but the amount of references and learning I got from him, he's my number one source at this point. I have to be humble enough to admit that. I mean, he's unleashed me from the chains of Canadian institutions. He really did. He really did. If I ever met him, I'd love to shake his hand and thank him for that, man. Because, yeah, once I started looking at the Bible from a psychological perspective and thinking about like archetypes like Carl Jung, it really did get me into wow, these systems I believe in, like logic and rationality and math and science, actually do have relevance in the moral landscape. These aren't disconnected. They're all
Mm.
connected. All like just like I thought, just like in my heart, just deep down in like what I felt, it's true. They are all connected. These things they have meaning. My education did have purpose, right? It's not just
Yeah.
for a job. It's not just for accolades. It did give me some sort of level-headedness in this realm. It gave me the ability to articulate these things, those kinds of things. I hate the modern education system. I'm very jaded about the prices of it, the debt
Yeah. Yeah.
surrounding it, yeah, all of that, and the culture around it. Nonetheless, I support Western institutions. I'm an advocate for
Yeah.
public education systems and those kinds of things. I think there's a space for it, and yeah.
Yeah. No. No. Knowledge is always key, man. That's something that we should always pursue.
It's
Um.
just these spiritual aspects need to be wrapped in. These spiritual aspects are being dropped, and it needs to be wrapped into the education system, not dogmatically. There needs to be a more modern approach, kind of how Peterson was trying to do, I think, where it's
That's cool,
approaching it
man.
from a rational point of view.
I kept asking myself, like, why do I care so much about this? But now, as I'm having this conversation with you, I think I share that same passion of like, hey, man, I'm in pursuit of truth. I'm in pursuit of all this, and I want other people to be able to have, especially my kids. I want them to have it. I want other people to be able to have this same um,
Oh, I'm gonna tell you
fire.
right now, your kids are gonna have it. You sound like a great father, man, and you're around in their lives. If you conversate like this, you sound like you're gonna lead by example, man. I would have no doubt that you'll see the fruits of your labor soon enough. Those kids will be because, and Peterson talks about. Hey, I'm going off on Peter. Hey, do you listen to Jordan Peterson at all?
Yeah, a lot of people hate him. Dude. I don't. I find him fascinating. I think he's a cool guy. I
Me
like
too.
him.
I haven't listened to him now for probably 5 years, but like before COVID, I was like obsessed with him for sure.
Yeah,
He's kind of like changed his style and like changed his commitments now, but especially when he was making those lectures, I was very much listening to him. And yeah, he talks a lot about parenting, right? And how you'll get the child that you deserve, kind of thing, right?
yeah,
If you treat your child like a little hostage and a little tyrant, that's what they'll be. But if you conversate with them like an adult and you give them the benefit of the doubt that they're actually quite articulate and independent and intelligent, that's what they'll manifest, um, so yeah, I think
awesome,
you're probably doing that, man. I think you're on your way.
cool, man.
I
Cool
would
to
love
know
to be a
this
father one
conversation
day.
was cool. Are you not? You don't have any kids right now?
No, I'm 32, but I would love to one day. I've been with my girlfriend for 12 years. I haven't proposed. We aren't married, and kids are down. I don't know. It's weird. This middle ground of culture, like the millennial cultures, like yeah, it's hard to move along. Like get a house, get a job. But I feel those pressures. But I guess I'm living up my life in the city and doing a job I really enjoy. So just
Yeah.
kind of procrastinating, I suppose.
Do before you get
But
too old,
yeah,
man. Cause try to enjoy them.
exactly.
Try to
I
enjoy them
know.
when they're young. So that's awesome. I hope everything goes well, man. I hope you have kids and seem like a good guy too. So
Thanks, G.
wish you the best, man. But
Yeah,
hey, dude,
thanks,
we
bro.
should. I'll reach out to you, man. Send me those books. I really want to read up on this a little bit more, and I think this kind of helped me understand my approach and where I stand. Because as you've seen, man, I take a little bit of a different approach to theology than other people, which sometimes it gets frowned upon. But I truly am trying to seek truth, and this is my main goal, my passion. So these conversations actually help me understand some of the stuff that I'm questioning in myself. So,
Hell yeah,
but
me too, man. Thank you. Me too.
let's keep in touch, man. I appreciate it. Please send me those books. I'm gonna read up on it, and yeah, I'll keep seeing you in lives, and hopefully we'll connect some more, bro.
Hell yeah, gang gang.
All right, man. I gotta go to work, man. Thanks.
Peace, peace, bro.
Later, bro. Bye.
So if anyone wants to talk about anything, I invite you to come up into the panel. We don't have to talk about Bitcoin. Um, I am interested in the normativity of science. Does science make any normative claims? Be interested to know if anyone has an opinion on that. We can also talk about whatever you want to talk about. We don't have to talk about that. Shark, if you're in here, come up here and talk to me about talk to me about crypto. No, we don't have to talk about crypto if you're uninterested. Talk about the normativity of science. I want to know if you think science makes any normative claims. I guess I got to make that my background. I think if there was any claim, normative claim that science makes, it's that we should use logic, right? We should use logic to derive our truth claims. That seems like a normative statement. And it seems like one that science and atheism makes objectively. If someone who's an atheist objectively and empirically observes someone being irrational, then they discard their claims as true. They falsify their claims. Science is a methodology of falsification. It allows us to not claim certainty, but at least separate ourselves from those who do. And so that seems like an objective claim, not a subjective claim. It seems like an objective, moral, normative claim. Maybe I'm wrong though. Someone come up here and talk to me about something. There's got to be someone in here. Shark, come up here. You're still in here. I only got like a few people in here, so someone else come up and talk to me. We can really talk about anything, but I'm looking for a conversation. Shark, come up and try to pressure me into judging this tournament. I would like to judge it. I'm scared though, to be honest with you. It's also a pretty big time commitment. But I am honored. I also hesitate because I don't know how much respect I have in the community. Like, I don't know how many people care about me being the judge of the tournament, you know? Kind of feel like it's a bit of a big weight also. Like $400 or $600, however much it is. People are going to be mad at me no matter what I vote. But I'm just being a puss. I don't really care. I mean, it's more the time commitment thing. It's a lot it's a bigger time commitment than just debating, which is one of the reasons I kind of pulled out. Um, Sunday, I just, as the summer comes, my weekends are just, I'm rarely on my phone. I'm sort of outside doing stuff, but the debate tournament you're doing is so sick. So I am tempted, and I'm not saying no because I'm leaving it. I'm leaving it open as a possibility. It would be pretty dope. Again, I am honored. I'm humbled and flattered and honored that you would ask me to do that. So it's definitely a possibility. Yo, bro.
Yo, do you know the difference between an extraction and a syllogism?
Huh. No, not really, no.
Yeah, nobody on TikTok talks about extractions.
Yeah.
My entire philosophy of religion course mandates that I write extractions.
Huh. So, what is it? Is it specifically versus syllogism? Like, what's the difference between
No,
the two?
he doesn't use the word syllogism. I think he just calls
Right.
syllogisms extractions.
Okay. Okay. What's the class?
Philosophy of religion.
Right. Right.
So, okay, this is what it says. Here are the rules. The extraction is in numbered premise, conclusion format. Number each and every claim, including your conclusion, which is the very last line. Use parentheses around your numerals as follows: 1, 2, 3. Single space each claim, double space between the claims. Within a single document.
So, that does sound like a syllogism.
I just don't know. I'll ask him, but I've never
I
seen.
think he's probably hesitating on the term syllogism because that's like a formal, logical. I don't know. Like maybe he's just like using vernacular.
No, but that's what he's having
theology.
me do. He's making me formalize it. Everything.
But perhaps extraction's like a theological vernacular.
He also in one of the assignments I was super confused because it went like 1, 6, 2, 7, 3, 8.
From the premises, like those are the premises.
I'd have to look. Yeah, I think that it is the premises. So like you would take
weird.
Like let's say that like you made an argument, right? That would be like 1, and then I would respond to that, and that would be 6, and then I would essentially have your syllogism, and then I would make a syllogism about your syllogism, and that turns into an extraction. I don't really understand it. I'm trying to figure it out.
Okay. Huh. Okay.
If I figure
I've
it out,
never heard
I'll
of
let
this
you
either.
know.
That's pretty cool. Is this like this must be like a methodology for theology, right? Like for specifically because you're going philosophy of religion. So this must be like
no, it doesn't even really like necessitate religion.
Okay then.
Yeah.
Like you're saying it could just be any extraction going back and forth
any
on
argument.
premises.
They're just
right.
using religion as like the main talking point. Like
Cool.
I had to like write some stuff about like Graham Oppy talking about the fine-tuning argument and stuff.
Yeah.
But,
It makes me think I suppose most realizations are extractions. Not syllogisms, because like if it is this, right, we're building off of each other's. If it was, I guess we're not doing formally.
If I'm right, I don't know. I'll ask him and I'll get it. Like, I'm just gonna ask him for the symmetry breaker between a syllogism and an extraction, because he doesn't. Not only does he say extraction, he doesn't use the word syllogism.
Right.
Let's see. Hang on. Let me type in still. Oh no, I can't do that. Yeah, no, I don't.
Honestly, one of the most confusing parts about academia is the widespread vernacular. Like any discipline has such specific vocabulary that the moment you specialize, you're literally getting lost on all the other specializations. Like that's kind of, I don't know. I feel like that's a little bit of a conspiracy theory, honestly. Like I don't know why that. I guess it makes sense that the particulars of disciplines need to be categorized that way, but also, especially in philosophy, it seems like the vernacular just gets so diluted, like it's so saturated. I don't even understand.
Here's an example. Okay, here's an example number one of a simple extraction. Okay. Here's the conclusion: there is a God. The motivation for this is there are reflective, informed, and extremely intelligent people who adamantly deny that there is a God. So the argument is one, if our entire physical cosmos had a beginning, then our entire physical cosmos had a cause. Two, our entire physical cosmos had a beginning. Three, thus, our entire physical cosmos had a cause. Four, if our entire physical cosmos had a cause, then there is God. Five, thus, there is a God. But then people would just say they reject two. People reject
Well,
that
no,
there's a
yeah,
beginning.
but the people who reject two, see, this is where I get bogged down, and like the people who reject two don't understand what a syllogism. I mean, you can get lost in the semantics of any of the premises, right? But like and number two is just the antecedent. There's nothing wrong with just stating the antecedent. You can't reject two based on validity, you
Why?
know?
No, I don't know.
Okay, well, okay. Well, what do you think validity is? This is
Well,
gonna get
yeah,
a little bit
like
jargony here.
yeah, so that's fine. It's not. It's I guess where I get confused is the soundness of an argument, right? Because like
Yes,
making it valid is just like it's in the correct format for it to be an
yes,
argument.
yes. But that's more important than the soundness because no matter how sound an argument is, it's always going to be tentative. Inductive inferences are always tentative. You know what I
Explain?
mean by that?
No.
There's no certainty to be arrived at through induction.
Can you explain the difference between inductive and deductive and abductive?
Yeah, except I have disagreements with people about this all the time because this is pertaining to the orientation or methodology of our method here. This is pertaining to a pretty meta conversation that most people are unwilling to have. But yes, so induction is always tentative and based on an inference rule. There's always some sort of assumption or measurement or principle that goes along with deduction, some sort of induction, some corresponding inference rule. So it's tentative. It's always tentative. It's never certain because of this inference rule. Logically, an induction is never we're not, it's basically harnessing this limitation of symbology that I always talk about, right? Like we can't get to objective truth through symbology because by definition a symbol is not an object. We're representing the object with the symbol. And
Here, too many words. Tell me which one do you want to start with? Induction, abduction, or deduction?
Abduction is kind of like in between. We can start with abduction because it's sort of in between both. Abduction just uses probability to infer an inference rule or like a probability of a hypothesis. Induction though just states a hypothesis, right? Like states so we take a conclusion, like we're gonna say all swans are white, and we go out and we measure through an inference rule, like if we observe white swans, then swans are white, and we go out in the world and we measure and observe the world. Now we could observe a black swan, and so then inductively we have to change our our terms, right? We have to go back and work backwards through our observation. So induction always relies on an observation. Maybe that's a better word to use than inference. Induction is always going to rely on an observation.
Okay.
Right? There's some sort of measurable, observable thing in the world that we can go infer about.
Induction.
Induction.
I'm observing something in the world. What's deduction?
Yes. Deduction is going to be like armchair reasoning. So I don't need to observe anything. It's the opposite. I could sit back and get knowledge. These are all right. Induction, deduction are philosophical terms about knowledge. So inductive knowledge, right? We're talking about what we learn, what we know. Deductive knowledge can be arrived at in a chair. We can be sitting at home. We don't need to observe anything. These are just symbolic logical principles. We're using logic to arrive at some sort of, I guess, syllogistic reasoning, or it's symbolic logic. We're symbolizing the world. So induction has a lot less to do with symbology, and deduction has a lot more to do with what you're talking about like validity, like the actual form of the argument is what we're talking about when we talk about deduction. The soundness is a lot more like inductive reasoning. The soundness is going to be questioning like the terms. Each term can be broken down semantically, and that's going to be more like inductive reasoning, right? We could question the soundness of any term. The how can we measure this term? How can we go and observe? Is this term even observable? Is it even like a legitimate term?
Okay,
Those
let me
kinds of
give
things.
let me give you another one. Okay, this
Yeah,
one's
sure.
easier. This is just modus ponens, or
Yeah.
maybe it's modus tollens. If but
So
this
it's a
ge-
negation.
this goes okay. It goes from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 6, 7, 8. So it continues the argument. I think I don't know. So
Okay.
6, 7, 8. So 6 is if virtues can be taught, then there are effective teachers of virtue. 7, there are no effective teachers of virtue.
Right.
Thus,
Do you see how number 2 is just asserting modus tollens there? Because all he did was negate the antecedent. So we've made the first statement, which is in this form of if A then B.
he negated the
Oh, you're right.
consequent.
You're right. The consequent. My bad. You're right. But so same. So that's what I meant. But so that's yeah. So you're on it. That's so far it's valid because all we're like looking at there is the structure. We don't care about the semantics of the terminology,
The
right?
fuck is the point of that? Wait, the only thing I care about is the semantics of the conversation.
When you're using inductive reasoning. But when you're using deductive reasoning, we're actually going backwards through the argument and just looking at the form of the argument to see if its structure is valid. Because deduction, right? The reason deduction is practical is what I get at with the spirituality component. If you're having an argument with your girlfriend, how relevant are the semantics of the terms? Versus, I would say, the structure of the argument. If you can step back and check yourself and be humble on your own terms, that's going to help you a lot more than getting bogged down in the semantics and using some sort of induction to prove your point is true. So deduction is very, very practical in like the spiritual realm of falsification, being humble, being willing to put forward a valid. See, validity is so important, bro, because if I don't put forward an argument that can be falsified, it's invalid. So by validity, I have to be humble enough to know.
To understand that you're it might not be sound.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
the whole point. That's the whole
yes,
point.
yes,
I give you a valid argument. You give me a counter valid argument, and then we discuss it, the validity of
yeah,
it, to
yes, and the validity,
determine which one is more sound.
Yes, and the validity is an invitation to you to question the soundness of my terms. So for someone to get bogged down in the soundness prematurely, right, is almost blasphemous to the whole process. You're like, I give you a valid claim, now immediately you question premise 2. It's like, well, hold on, man. You're not being gratuitous or generous in the conversation. I invited you to question. I negated the consequent. My premise 2 is just negating the consequent. I'm leaving room for you to falsify my theory. So for you to just jump on that opportunity shows it's like premature. You're just premature and you're sort of unstable in your approach. You don't
So
have
like,
the
okay, so
methodology.
let's say let's say you threw at me, if virtues can be taught, then there are effective teachers of virtue. There are no effective teachers of virtue. Thus, virtues cannot be taught. And I would say, if virtues can be taught, then there are effective teachers of virtue. Virtues can be taught, therefore there are effective teachers of virtue.
I don't know if I tracked. I'm sorry, I tried to track there, but I don't know if I fully tracked the last
It's okay.
one.
If virtues, I would hit you with, if virtues can be taught, then there are effective teachers of virtues. Virtues can be taught. Conclusion: there are effective
Yes.
teachers of virtues.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're
Right.
so now that both of us have, like, you have your valid argument. I have my valid argument. Now
Yes.
we would go over like what it means. You would substantiate why you think there are no effective teachers of virtue, and I would say why there is.
Yeah, I said the issue here is like what we get talked about with your tournament, which is that how much of this becomes pleading to people's emotion in the audience, and how much of this becomes factual investigation of the actual problem. I don't know how much an inductive claim, because of its tentative nature, can arrive us at any truth claims. Seems sort of irrational and circular to get bogged down in the semantics. Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting? Like it seems redundant for us to go back and forth on a topic like this because of the right with so this is why I think spirituality is so important and becomes the topic of debate, because without orientation none of these conversations have any meaning. We have to debate the syntax. We have to debate validity because that's where our grounded morality comes from. Without that moral orientation, all of the next semantic arguments are going to be subjective.
Do you think that for the tournament I should get everybody to submit to me a valid argument for their position round one?
That's a pretty good idea, like a prerequisite to enter the tournament. That's a pretty good idea. I would also say that I had this thought earlier this morning. The topics are crucial. And I think, and this is just my gut impulse, and I don't know how much you're already doing this, you should choose topics that are like actually crucially important to you. Not random topics anymore. Fuck the random topic thing. That's really entertaining and awesome. I love that. But if this is actually a long-term pursuit for you, you should actually put up the topics that matter the most to you as a genuine investigation and record and documentation of like a modern debate on a topic, and give the debaters actual respect in that sense. Like, yo, this is actually a topic of interest, a modern
So what I was
topic right now.
what I've been like interested in is getting people who have a specialty. So maybe it's not like something that I personally
Right,
care about, because like I
right.
care about all of the topics, right? Except for finances for some reason, which we talked about. Um, or like horoscopes. Like I'm not having people debate whether horoscopes or zodiac signs are accurate, right? I don't give a shit about that. I don't think it's real, right? That could be like a fun topic. But what I've been interested in is getting people who truly debate on this app to put up money. So for example, you know Scooter, right?
I don't know if I do. Sorry, no, I don't know if I do know him. But
Scooter,
I'm sure he has an actual a few topics that he like actually
he
debates.
only talks about abortion. He
Okay.
every day on this app, he only debates pro-life, right? And so there's someone named Sarah, who's the first woman to sign up for the tournament, by the way. And one of her favorite positions is abortion, but she can do other stuff as well, and she can defend pro-life, yada yada yada. I offered Sarah and Scooter to moderate them putting up $100 each. Winner walks away with $100. They both accepted. We just haven't set it up yet. That's kind of like what I think would be cool next. Finding the people who claim that they're so good at these debates and then getting like formalized judges, having them write syllogisms or extractions. I still don't know the difference. And actually making it like educational for the people listening instead of them just debating crossing guards all day.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
I think that if Dean and Brooks like put up $100 and there were actual judges, well then it would have been better. But when it's just a pissing contest for who can piss further, yeah, this is weird.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I agree with all of that. That's awesome. Dude, the potential there is great, man. My heart is this is a dreamer. This is totally a dreamer thought, but like I see potential in the community with all these young academics who are eager to debate for some serious legwork in academia, not through the typical institutions. I think our formalized institutions are dropping the ball somewhat, and this space is providing genuine discourse somewhat again to our peers in our community that could be, uh, you know, actually productive. That's where my heart goes. It's like if we could decide on topics that weren't just clickbait topics that genuinely got us interested. Things like what should the government look like, or like actual genuine productive I don't know, like topics that could change things, bro. Like that's where I go with this. Is
Yeah.
like I think, yeah, like, but
I
I
was
know that
messaging
that's
my
what you're
professor.
thinking too. But
I was messaging my professor, and I hit him with, because like I've been trying to think about like contradictions and whatever, and what that means, and if I believe in contradictions, if they can exist. And I brought up the married bachelor thing, and I told him that it's just a social construct, and from my understanding, logic is only dealing with objective things, and there's no like objective marriage. No one can be objectively married, right? And so this is just going to be like a cultural norm. So even if I'm married in America, I'm not married in Pakistan or Australia or whatever. And so I am simultaneously a married bachelor. And he like, the first thing in his response was, "Ooh, I've never thought about this." The fuck do you mean you've never thought about this? You have a PhD. What do you? That's the thing that I took the most out of his response. He said, "I've never
Yeah.
thought about it like that." What the fuck
Yeah.
are you talking about?
Yeah, like he could have just said he could have just pointed out the tentative nature of induction, right? Like you are going forward and measuring this term bachelor, and you found a society that defined the term differently. Well, now we're just using deduction to redefine our terms, because the term marriage it's no problem for me to admit that yes, our truths are societally defined. Such symbols are interpretive. There's no way out of that. That again, there's no way out of the tentative nature
But
of
we would
induction.
have to hold that marriage has a universal, a mind independent standard of what it means to be married, right? If it so like take it from like
The mind independent standard you're looking for, the objectivity you're looking for in truth, has to do with validity, not soundness. So when you get lost in the semantics of a term like bachelor, well, we're not, again, of course, the tentative nature of these terms. Yeah, I agree with you. There's no
well,
mind
not even
independent
bachelor.
definition.
It would be more about married, right? And what it means to be married.
You're right. All those terms, though, any term is going to be tentative in nature. There's no way to arrive at a conclusive definition, but that doesn't get away from the objectivity of the syntax, right? Validity and logic do have objective notions. It's not in the semantics. It's in the structure of the argument. That's the objectivity. Once we agree,
Okay, so do you want me to like write an extraction for this?
If you want to, I don't know. But do you see what I'm saying there? I don't know if I don't know. Am I talking gibberish, or do you kind of see what I'm saying?
Here, let me just try. Okay.
Jim, you don't understand what I'm saying either. I haven't been reading the comments at all. I'm saying that validity is objective, right? We can actually measure whether something's valid or not. The objective nature of the structure, the syntax of validity is not subjective.
Okay, here, ready? So, my conclusion, maybe I'm doing this wrong. I'll just try. My conclusion is I am a married bachelor. Okay? And my motivation is people believe that this is a logical contradiction. One, if I'm married in America, then I'm a bachelor in Australia. I am married in America, thus I am a bachelor in Australia.
Okay.
You're gonna have to repeat that, Shark.
Yeah. If I'm married in America, I am a bachelor in Australia. 2, I am married in America. 3, thus I am a bachelor in Australia.
Yeah, that seems fine.
Jim said it doesn't follow. He doesn't accept it. He doesn't even think my argument is valid.
Well, so
it might not be. It might not be.
I would argue to the depths, to Hades, that's a valid argument.
Look, yeah, just the form of the argument is valid, but because of the terms that's in it, the terms are unspecified. So it might not follow.
You see, then this is what I'm saying, logic. This is why semantics are more important than the validity of the argument. I think me and you think backward in this retrospect. We could even do an extraction for this, right? Whatever. But like your position is deductions are
When
more important than semantics, right?
only because how we approach semantics is going to rely on that orientation.
Like
So
Jim
the
says,
semantics all rely on that orientation. It's
Jim
not
says
bad.
it's
It's
valid,
valid,
not sound. I
not
don't
sound.
even
That's
I don't
right.
even know what a sound argument is. Give me a sound argument. Anybody, truly.
Well, this
Yeah,
is where
But
abduction kind of does come in. Sorry, Evil Dust. You go ahead. Man.
yeah, the sound argument is just saying there's a valid argument with true premises. So for one, um, a valid but not sound argument would just be like Socrates is a fish. All fish live on Mars. Therefore, Socrates lives on Mars. That's a valid
Yeah,
argument, but none of the premises are true.
yeah.
And then the second one is just, Socrates is a man. All men are mortal. Therefore, Socrates is mortal. Well, all those premises are true and it's valid.
But
So
okay,
it's sound.
but given the semantics, this is a sound argument.
Which one? The one you provided?
Yeah, the one
The marriage in
yeah,
Australia.
the one I
Yeah,
provided.
yeah.
Given efficient definitions and semantics, I can be a married bachelor.
Well, it's not. The reason I said it
Yeah.
doesn't follow in the way is because what's meant by bachelor there is unclear. That kind of term
this
is
is
vague.
this is what I'm saying, right? We created the concept of marriage, right? It doesn't exist. It's a creation of human beings. We're not looking at atomic particles. We're not looking at physics. We're not using a scientific method, right? We are just saying this is a process that we as humans created, and it's going to depend on whatever the culture says it is. So of course the language is going to matter because it doesn't objectively exist.
So when Evil Dusk said the soundness
That's Dawn.
relies
That's
on.
Dawn.
Okay. Word. When you said that the soundness relies on the premises being true, so that's all good. But this word truth is being somewhat distorted, right? Because we understand that next step of the soundness of verifying the truth of a premise is going to be tentative. There's no way for us to arrive at like perfection in that verification. We can't verify the truth of a premise complete, right? In complete certainty. There's always going to be limitations.
I don't see why that is.
I could be wrong. I suppose I could be wrong, but because of what I'm siding with Shark here, I suppose it's because the semantic nature of a term is going to rely on our interpretation of the symbology. There's no way to escape that like symbolic nature, right? Of we're trying to represent an object. There's an object in the real world, trying to measure length. Well, the length of an object relies on a standard, some sort of centimeters or inches. These are arbitrary standards. Doesn't matter which one we choose, but without and that arbitrary societal defined standard, we can no longer measure length.
Right. Like if I have an atom and we can observe the atom and someone describes it accurately, and I describe it or define it inaccurately, I'm just simply wrong descriptively, right? But if it is nothing more than a societal construct and social agreement for tax purposes, and this does, like if you were to say that marriage is a worldwide concept, and if you're married in Alaska, you're married everywhere, right? That this is like not just like a federal law, it is it would be worldly. I don't know. Like it would apply
Global.
everywhere.
Global law.
Right? It's a global marriage. Until we have a global marriage, married bachelors exist.
Yeah, like
Well,
he's right. He is right. Technically.
Hold on. That's not quite right. The reason is just because you could just clarify what's meant by bachelor, and then all you needed to say is that what's meant by bachelor is that you're married in any system.
Again,
Yeah.
but this comes down to the semantics, right? But if I change the semantics because it's not an objective thing that is descriptively true, right? I don't disagree with you, Don, but you have to. We're both right. We are
This-
both.
th-
Look,
We're both
that's just
right
to say that-
depending on the semantics that we are using for something that is simply a social construct.
Yeah,
The
I mean,
interesting
that's
part
just true of all. That's just true of all propositions because propositions are just syntactic tools. That's all they are.
Yeah,
Well,
but
not if it's descriptively true.
the
Sorry,
interesting part
what's
here is it
descriptively true?
Like the properties of a tree, for example. I could.
Right.
I
But
couldn't.
the
I could not
terms you're
give you.
using to describe the properties are the syntactic tool, right? The
Yeah,
propositions
they're still-
themselves are the syntactic tool. So when you're saying you could just change like what's meant by bachelor, that's fine, but you just be referring to a different concept. The proposition would be changing.
So
Look,
when
because
you
you could
say-
say something like I'm an unmarried or I'm a married bachelor, and then all I mean by bachelor is that I wear Hawaiian shirts, or I'm a guy that wears Hawaiian shirts or something.
No,
like
no, no,
that.
no, 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 no. We keep prioritizing bachelor. Prioritize what it means to be married, right? So, like, what is the standard of being married? What does that
Yeah.
mean?
Yeah. Just you're recognized by some system to be a conjoined union.
Okay. So if one system recognizes this as valid, but another system doesn't recognize this as valid, what do we do?
It doesn't matter because in the way that I gave the term was just that in some system you're recognized as a union. Doesn't matter about all the systems.
Wait, no, that's
Just in
fine.
that,
But then
at
we
least
run
one.
into Amdir's possibilism argument, and we get nowhere. It's possible that anything is true, right?
You'd-
wait.
you would
The
pro-
whole point
you-
of
you'd
hold on.
have
The
to
whole
get
point of
bogged down.
possibilism. The whole point of
You go ahead.
possibilism is just the fact that there's a different possible world where the negation of that proposition is true.
Okay, so is it possible that married bachelors exist?
Is it possible that married bachelors exist? Not in the way that I define the terms, no.
Yeah, see, this is what I'm saying, Logic. I truly think semantics are more important. Because if you don't know how somebody is explaining their terminology, and more importantly, if an individual can't conceptualize their own words, there is no way we understand each other. I don't even think it's possible.
Yeah, but that's why the
I think in
deductive
all
method-
worlds it's impossible. Haha, see what I did
That's-
there?
That's why the deductive method is so necessary in that state, though, because we could go round and round in semantics without understanding each other. The moment someone actually questions and empathizes with their opposition and is willing to see the semantics through their definition, the validity and soundness can be realized of their argument. But without that deductive approach, you will just be continuing on with your own assertions and your own definitions.
Yeah, it's not just about my definitions, right? It would be disingenuous of me to be like, only my definition here works. It's this is the definition that I'm using, right? And as long as it's consistent and accurate in explaining like a concept, then it's fine. And then if Dawn has a different way of explaining it accurately, it's still fine. We're both right.
Yes.
And just mean
Yes.
something different.
The communication's the issue, right? Like if we what the point of talking about it is to get each other's points across to each other. So as long as you can articulate
and then
his position
realizing
and he can
we're-
articulate yours, it's good.
I think the craziest thing is that I don't know what happens in our society. I don't know if it's in our nature. I don't know if it's a product of the public school system. But I think that a majority of us are so used to like disagreeing and thinking the other person is inherently wrong. Right? And this leads to like turmoil and screaming and
Yeah.
Parkers, right?
Yeah. The way I would kind of expand on that is I think we're again sort of like traumatized by disagreement. We don't accept the inevitability of disagreement and how important disagreement is. Like when you witness, this is one of the most fascinating things I've noticed. When I witness a positive, good conversation, it's still in the form usually of a disagreement. Like conversation seems to rely on some form of disagreement. If I were to just simply agree with you on all terms and all points you make, I would never really say anything. I would just be sitting there going, "Yeah, I agree. Yeah, I agree." So so our tendency to be like adverse to disagreement kind of makes us.
I've been trying to teach my mom about like syllogisms and stuff, and like it's okay for us to disagree because
Yes.
she's like you love debating, you'll debate anybody about anything, and I don't want to debate you. And I'm like, Mom, I
Right.
don't think you understand like what my purpose in debating is. Like I don't want to be
Yes.
right. I'm probably wrong, right? The goal
Yes.
in debating is for me to be as coherent as possible with my perspective on a topic or an idea or problem, and then you get to tell me the opposite of that if you disagree. So you hear
Yes.
me out, I hear you out, and we see where there is a disagreement and why
Yes.
there is a disagreement, right? But we have
Yes.
to be reasonable.
Yeah, I think that genuine juxtaposition of a disagreement actually produces a new term usually. Like length is a juxtaposition of distance over, or sorry, like let's say like speed is a juxtaposition of distance over time, right? You need these two terms, these two terms compared against each other to come up with this new term.
That brings up
speed.
Yo. That's exactly how I ran this with my wife yesterday. I think squared circles can exist because that's the other contradiction. A squared circle, right? Or a circle can't be a square can't be a circle. That's fine, right? But a squared circle can exist.
Is that just a sphere?
No. That's an entirely different thing. It would
Okay.
be like, just imagine like a circle with a square around it, but it's necessarily connected.
Okay.
Right? Because these symbols do not objectively exist, right? Math does not. We can argue about it, right? That's fine. But if shapes don't actually exist, well, we're just making them up. So there's no reason. It's kind of like two hydrogen. Hello. Okay.
Very
Two
good.
hydrogen molecules, right? Can't be an oxygen molecule. An oxygen molecule can't be a hydrogen molecule. But when you pair them together properly, you create H2O, which is a new thing.
Right.
So we can have a squared circle. There's no
Yeah.
contradiction in this.
Well, Shark, there wouldn't be a contradiction if, like the predicates in the term, were not, like if they were exclusive or something like that.
I'm sorry,
But
I don't get it.
yeah, so in math, shapes are described by the kinds of angles and sides they have, right? Even if these mathematical objects don't exist in real life, that doesn't change the fact that they're described in a certain way in certain formal systems. And so in a formal system, a circle is something that has no sides, or that it has infinitely many sides or something like that. Or sorry, not infinitely many sides, infinitely many angles, or no angles, depending on how you're describing it, contains 360 degrees. A square also contains 360 degrees, but it necessarily has four corners, four equilateral sides.
Yeah, but what if you're connecting them to and you're creating one new thing? I agree a circle can't be a square can't be a circle. That's fine. But the question is, can we combine these two mathematical concepts and create something? You can call it something new. You can call it RAR, right? I don't give a shit, right? But it's the concept of a circle and a square coexisting together as one thing.
It's kind of like trying to see, obviously he's going to the edges there, but he's trying to see how maybe something that seems contradictory or something that seems irrational can produce some sort of teleology in the end. It can have, in its comparison, even though maybe the terms on their own don't make sense, when we start comparing the terms, there might be something fruitful in that comparison, weirdly. It seems like a weird phenomenon that seems counterintuitive, but this seems to be implied across like most linguistic models.
Yeah, like what if us combining shapes creates a new shape, and that new shape creates a shape that we thought to be contradictory, but it actually exists.
The only issue I see is the
like
shape thing.
It wouldn't
the
be a new shape.
Shapes have limitations, so you're trying to use shapes as objects of symbology when they're more like objects. Shapes are less like symbols and more like objects. When I'm talking more about symbology, although shapes are somewhere in the middle, so it is an interesting example actually to use.
Right, so like somebody in the comments is saying you're predicating a circle with a property connected to a square, which creates an entirely new thing.
Wait, that doesn't create a new thing, right? Because
you don't think that a circle that is necessarily attached to a square in some respect is a new shape?
No, because I mean they already do this in geometry, algebra, and calculus, right? All you're doing is breaking down the fundamental shapes when you're doing something like that. So if you saw something that was a square with a circle inside of it, they would just say it's a square with a circle inside of it. They
Yeah,
wouldn't call. They wouldn't like come up
that's
with
what we
some new
say.
name
But
for
what
it.
if that's wrong? What if we're missing a mark here? What
Wait,
if like I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm just
wrong is
saying
just described by the formal system in
I don't
which
know what
you're
that means.
like indexing
No,
it to.
he could be no, but Don, he could be saying he could be questioning his own terms. See, what he's doing there is he's questioning his own English terms. He's not necessarily questioning the mathematical formalization of these shapes. He's saying, right, there's two. It's the validity of this statement is confusing because it's like a translation. You're putting a formal mathematical object into English or into a like the word circle or square. It has mathematical derivations, but it's an English word. Those are English words. So he can be as flexible on those English words, right, as can be allowed in his own sort of psychology. Obviously, as long as it doesn't disrupt the formal system, he can still be flexible in his own terminology. Is
Yeah,
basically what
look,
he's doing.
nobody's like disagreeing that semantics are variable, and you can just use semantics and to refer to any such things. We know that's how different languages work, right?
Exactly.
That's not an interesting conversation. What's interesting
I
is the
agree.
kind of conceptual understanding you have, right? So when you're talking about a squared circle and you're saying there's a circle inside of a square and you call that a squared circle, is that term wrong? Well, that term is wrong just in virtue of the formal system you're referring to, right? Because in the formal systems, they do have these kinds of references to talk about things, right? Like in math, specifically in like
Yes.
trigonometry, a right triangle is referring to a specific kind of triangle with a 90-degree angle, right?
Yes.
yeah, but
Exactly.
couldn't I just prioritize an informal system?
Well, if by informal system you just mean your own language, you can, right? And then you can just have some conceptual understanding that's different. You're going to lose utility in conversations, though. And
I
the
know.
whole point of the language is
Like,
to
but,
create consistent
okay,
utility.
but like instead of saying there is a circle inside of a square, right? What if there's more utility in saying something else and giving it a new title?
I
I don't
also
know.
don't know if
I don't
it's
know what
just
the utility
utility.
is, but
I don't know if it's
if
just utility.
well, let's
Utility
just
might
say
be
this
a
because
limiting
he
term.
said utility, right? So Don, if I could come up with a justified, valid reason that there is more utility in my language system, would you accept it then? I don't have that right now, by the way. It'd be something along the lines of like, if there's more utility in my language system, then we should change the language. There is utility in my language system, thus we should change the language.
It's so funny because I started this whole live trying to get into the normativity of science, and we're right there. We're like right into it. It's like, so are we saying that there's some sort of normativity here towards rationality in the scientific community?
I didn't understand the question.
Well, are we suggesting that we should be using these formal systems?
Don is.
Right. Well, I'm asking you, Don. Right? Is that kind of like a normative claim?
Sorry, I'm kind of lagging, so I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah, no, you're good.
Are you saying should we
Not trying to like,
we
get you.
like use the formal systems, right?
Yeah,
the
doesn't that
question?
seem
Should
like
we use formal
doesn't that
systems?
seem like a natural doesn't that seem like a natural claim of science that we should use these formal systems?
No. Science doesn't make any normative claims.
Huh.
Okay. So Don, if I could come up with a way that
talked
says
about
my
using formal systems.
he's lagging because he's in the car. If I could explain.
Hold on, give me 1 second.
No problem. I just think that this is interesting, right? Because like I don't know,
Super interesting.
like I think it was like last year. Can't believe it's been that long. I've been debating on this stupid app for like 2 years. I've learned a lot, man. I've learned more on this app in 2 years than I've learned in all of my public school education
Yeah.
combined.
I agree.
Sorry,
I agree.
can y'all hear me now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you sound good.
What was the question?
My question was, because you brought up the utility of language, right? If I could conclude that there's more utility with my language system and my like concept of shapes, would you then adopt that informally?
Yeah. So you would just be, well, you would just be making an argument for why the formal system should change.
That's fine. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, those are valid. That's, basically what the whole trans debate is over.
Okay, so can we say there is a chance that a squared circle can exist?
If what you mean by squared circle is, something conceptually different than what's already in the formal system, then yeah.
Right. His response was so valid. I can't help but just notice the validity of Don's response simply because of the if conditional. He could have really said anything there, but the fact that you started that with if and then went into his semantics, like that's the mark of a genuine conversation.
Yeah,
Right there.
'cause he had to actually listen to what I said and then validate it in one, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
And that's the hard thing to do.
Do you guys understand how difficult actually communicating about disagreements is? Like Don,
Yeah.
Don, I don't know
Yeah.
like your formal education, right? But you're up there. How long have you been studying this? Are you in a constant state of existentialism too?
No, I just started studying philosophy academically, I think last semester.
No, the fuck you did not. You've been debating on this app for like at least 6 months. What are you talking about? Last semester?
Yeah, that other stuff is just, self-taught. You can learn a lot more by just
that's crazy
reading philosophy
impressive.
books.
Yeah, that's crazy impressive, bro.
Well, no, let me tell you about, academic system. All your undergrad classes are not going to be very fun. Currently taking ethics and, logic and critical thinking, and logic is, fine, but ethics is a snooze fest.
I'm taking philosophy of religion right now.
Yeah, that sounds interesting.
Yeah, my professor is really cool. He says, listen to me. I don't give a shit about your grades. I don't care if you turn in your assignments. This is what I'm going to do for y'all. You have an opportunity to learn incredible information in this course. At the end of this course, you will grade yourself. I will give you any grade that you put on that paper.
That's crazy.
That's great. That's insane.
I mean, that's kind of how it should be done. The question is, is it an online course or is it in person?
Mine's it's mix.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I think philosophy of religion is like really important if the class is done in a certain format where you guys are basically doing like devil's advocate debates, things like that.
Online, bro, I've
where
been
you have to
telling
go
my
and study
I've been telling my
beforehand.
professors to incorporate debates at the end of every class. They'll be like, yo, what should we have done different in this class? And I'm like, you need to start having debates. You need to have people take a position and then you moderate it and you teach people how to have disagreements.
Okay, why that's so important is because what is the academic institution if not a bunch of debates? If we can't debate, what are all the discussions going on? They're debates. So yeah, I absolutely agree, man.
Yeah.
Well, maybe debate is just a strong word for people who are typically in like academia referred to debates. They typically want to just have discussions, and the kinds
You're
of
right.
the kinds
You're
of
right.
conflict that happen in formal papers aren't really like debating. It's kind of like sorting
You're
through
right.
terms, kind of
Discourse.
Yeah. When I say debate, I mean like reasonable discussion of disagreement, right? Like you tell me, okay, you believe X, I believe Y. Let's talk about it. And at the end of our disagreement, right, just 5 minutes, right, professor can shut it off and he could say, this is what you could have done better. This is what you could have done better. Great job to both of you. Moving on, right? Super simple, crazy effective. And that's why. Hey, Don, wait a minute. Don, no, you're a coward, bro. Don't be a fish. Don, sign up for my tournament.
Bro, I've got like so much work. I
Dog.
can't.
Okay, wait. You don't even know what day it's on.
Yeah, what day is it on?
June.
I'm assuming it's soon.
No, you get to plan out. It's June 23rd.
Yeah, so soon.
That's soon to you?
I am taking 4 10-week summer courses. I have to write a 7-page paper. I have to write a 5-page paper. I have to do a money project. And then I also have to do um, some stupid thing for my logic course.
Yeah, and it sounds like you got plenty of time to do a 3-hour debate.
Yeah, definitely not, especially if I'm going to be at work.
Damn it. Don would take it. Divinity said he's doing it.
Yeah, good for him. He's not taking any classes.
My sleeper pick. No, not like that. Like, I was just surprised. My sleeper pick is Sarah. Is Divinity really not taking any courses?
Not this summer, no.
Oh.
He just graduated high school.
What?
He literally just graduated high school last semester.
Jesus Christ. Don't make me feel. How old are you?
26.
26?
Yeah.
Oh, W. Yeah, man. I mean,
Older than that.
the tournament's been cool, man. Maybe after the summer you'll have some availability. Because listen, man, you're a smart dude. You'd be a strong candidate in the debate sphere.
Yeah, maybe one day.
Okay, I am interested on what Don said about how like proper academia isn't quite a debate, it's discourse, and I do think the juvenile version of discourse, it looks something like debate, like the young students figuring out how to debate. It's kind of like the prerequisite to then get into serious discourse later.
Yeah.
And this touches on what I was kind of getting at. It's like I think we have an opportunity here to sort of, or you do, or whatever, if you're into this this debate stuff, Shark, to formalize sort of how this is going to look, not just set it up as a debate but also as a productive leading into sort of towards discourse. The possibility of maybe even if it is just publishing the videos of the debate with some keynotes at the bottom or something like that, that's still pretty dope and productive, especially if the topics are good.
Yeah, I need to do a better job of actually uploading the debates. I fail on that respect.
I'm down, but I got really discouraged because my first one I did film, I uploaded it, and then the person I debated flagged it and got it all removed. So then
Yeah,
I didn't upload
the
any
thing
other
that you
one.
should do is upload it on YouTube.
Yeah, I put. You're right. There should be a separate page. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, TikTok's just too soft for that. Especially like genuine disagreements, TikTok's way too soft. You would have to create just like burner accounts.
Yeah.
And expect the burner accounts to get banned.
Yeah, TikTok's crazy like that, hey? I can't even post my BMX stuff. All my BMX stuff you've liked and stuff, it all gets taken down.
It's just you know what I think it is? I think that their algorithm is so good at like finding stuff that it takes down innocent videos to like overcompensate to ensure all the other stuff is gone.
Sure. Yeah. It's crazy though that a video where I'm doing a trick and not even falling gets flagged as like unsafe activity or whatever. It doesn't even have a fall. It's like actually a land.
Yeah. But yeah, I think if you want, like, I don't know, do you want to like think about being a judge or?
I'm here. I consider you a friend at this point, man. Like I'm here for you. So if you need a judge, I want to do it for you. Keep looking for people and stuff. But dude, I'm always down. I'm always down. Same with being a contestant. Like if you needed someone, I would do it for sure.
Yeah, man. If you don't
I'm
listen, man,
down.
if you don't want to, that's fine. Don't worry about it. I just listen, man. I think you're a sincere dude. I do. I think that on this app, there's a lot of disagreements, a lot of miscommunication. I consider you a sincere individual. I'm not worried about like you making a mistake. I trust your judgment in terms of like being as unbiased as possible, giving a justified reason. And if people got mad at you for your vote, fuck them, right? Like that's fine.
Yeah, most interestingly too, since we have such different ideas on stuff, it probably will most likely be the opposite of you evening stuff out often. I thought that would probably be good. Like if you and I align on something, I would say that then it's pretty definitive, honestly, because you and I
it's
see
the good thing
differently.
is it's between me. It would be me, you, and then the audience. So let's say that it's
Exactly.
you and the audience. Well, that person wins. The audience agrees with you, and I'm the odd person out, right? So it just if me and you agree and we're against the audience, well, the audience might be mad at us, but me and you agree. So
Totally.
That's
And
just the
because
way
we
that it
see so
works.
differently, most of the times I don't think that would be the case. Like, and if we did see similarly, I think it'd be because it's pretty obvious.
No, Rebecca said that she is taking a break from TikTok and dealing with personal things. So everybody send good energy to Rebecca, but she's not going to do it, and Volv showed no interest. So
Eric, what's up?
What's going on? I was just
Yeah.
listening to your discussion because I actually do believe semantics is an extremely important part in debate. Regardless, that I do understand that like a lot of people get bored of it. That's why I've talked to you about that, Shark. That before debates, people need to agree on terminology before actually sitting down debating stuff.
yeah,
Because
I think
yeah,
for this next one, we're almost at max. I think Brody asked me today if there's room for him and his friend, and so we might be locked in today. We'll see, and then I'm gonna send everything out. Once they have their topics, I think I'm gonna tell them to tell me all of the important definitions for their debate to send to their opponent, and then create a syllogism or extraction. Still don't know the difference. I'll figure it out one day. For their position of what they're arguing.
and to me that's a really good idea because I mean if, especially with these organized debates, the smaller debates that you're doing, if we sit there for 5 minutes debating like what the definition of like let's say you do abortion and we're discussing when the time for then you're
That's what
just
happened.
wasting
That's what
it.
happened with with Logic, right? Logic in the first one where he got discouraged, he was prioritizing just like removing. He was talking about like the normative ethics, and Divine was talking about like the lethal abortions, and so they disagreed on how they were like what they were actually debating, even though the topic was abortion. They weren't even debating the same thing.
I'll take responsibility for that, though. I could have,
No,
I could
but
have done a
that
little
But
better
that's
at
why
looking at what the topic
I'll
was.
take responsibility, and that's why I'm going to try to create more clarity between the people this time, and I can send like it. Imagine if you would have had a syllogism from Divine Order before you went into it. You would have known his position beforehand.
Totally.
I think that's
Go ahead.
necessary. Yeah. Well, I was gonna say I think that's necessary for even on bigger debates. Let's say that me and Logic were debating about which chips are the best. I don't know, and I think that let's say we're going to schedule for a Saturday. I would say I think Fritos are the best. Here's my position of why I think Fritos are best. You say I don't know, Chips Ahoy or I don't, and then you give me your position of what is best at this one, so that I can at least understand it. So that when you came in here, I'm not saying they're like, can you define this? Can you define that? And then we spend an hour just working on definitional, which is important in debates to understand what everyone's talking about. So
Yeah. I might even do it for the semifinals too, so that they know what their position is. They have more time, because if not, then they know what the final topic is going to be every time. They don't know what's going to happen in the semifinals. So I don't know if like it's beneficial to get them to be like on the spot debate this right now, or if I should give them a certain amount of time to do research and get their point more formalized.
Yeah. I mean, this format is dependent on what you're going for, and this is where I'm hitting on. It's like you could do a lot with whatever you decide on. You have a lot of potential here, man. Not just with these minute things, but also where you take it. Like how you formalize this, what topics you choose, and everything is really important. I think you could actually, I don't know, like if you do get more people time to prepare on a topic that is really important, you can get somewhere with these discussions.
You know
Like,
what
I
the
think
most important topic is? Like the most important topic that we can't have conversations until we answer this question. It's free will. I think fundamentally, foundationally.
That's why I came up. First, I want to say, Shark, your debates I think are outstanding, but they're extraordinarily important for the same reasons that you've mentioned. Teaching people how to disagree in a way that is going to be actually productive. And I think it's really, really cool. And I've been trying to put together a debate. I wanted to do it on your platform, where it's a 3x3, myself, Bart, and Jordan, but none of the
Jordan,
Philpros.
Trinitarian Jordan.
No. Universal. He goes by Universal.
I know. Okay, understand now.
Yeah, so we're trying to get that together, and so I'm putting it out there. I think that all the Phil Bros are afraid of us. I think that's what it is.
I would love to host that debate. I listen to him all the time and you all the
Wait,
time.
I
That'd
can,
be awesome.
I can probably get J Mike, Amdir, and Ruckster to do a 3v3 against you guys.
That would be great. If listen, I've asked Amdir, and I'm just putting it out. I think he's afraid. I think that's what it is, and he knows. And there's good reason for him to be afraid, and I understand that. J Mike has said that he's been open to it. He'd be thinking about it, but I don't know. I'm just trying to get these guys to come to the table, and I want to discuss free will.
Yeah, I genuinely don't think that any conversation can occur if we disagree about free will.
So let me hear your guys. Why? Because I'm not as I don't
Because
lean
you
that
can't
way as much.
because the justice system is going to be based around our ability to control or not control ourselves. Our ability to communicate is going to be based around our ability to control or not control ourselves. When we say words like I or me, and I start asking people, what do you mean by that? What is the you inside of you? People have no explanation of that. They might reduce it down to a brain, and they say they can control their brain, but they can't control their brain. And then they can see that the chemicals are actually the thing controlling their brain, so they can't actually control it at all. Or compatibilism is they accept this as a figment of our imagination, but they accept it doesn't actually exist. But for like moral responsibility, we pretend as if it does.
So free will being our conscious ability to make choices.
Like to
Free.
control a single thing you do. That is how I define free will. Maybe they have a different explanation, but like when I'm thinking about this and when I'm talking to people, I want to know, do you believe that we can actually, if I say any random word, banana, did I control that word actually? Right? Is there something inside of me that allows me to actually control it, or am I a chain of uncontrollable determined cause and effect?
Saul, would you agree with that definition?
Absolutely, yeah. Because primarily the opposition is saying that there is no control. They're saying essentially
Yeah.
that everything is just a response mechanism, and because it's response mechanism, they've just erased the individual. And
How
then
do they
what Shark
escape?
is saying is very true. They're also then saying essentially that we should redefine our social structure, because otherwise we're putting the onus and responsibility on what? An individual that has no power?
They can't. How am I going to punish somebody who has no ability to control themselves outside? Like, this literally comes back to might makes right. That's the conclusion of this.
Yeah, there's so much here.
No,
this
there's so much. There is an unbelievable amount of information in the free will debate. It's not just free will. It's everything that you could ever debate with the foundation of free will.
Right.
Absolutely
Yeah,
true.
I hear
Absolutely
it.
true.
I hear it.
Identity, everything having to do with what is existentialism and all of its facets, everything. So I think that's an outstanding idea. It would be great if Logic, are you one of the judges?
Well, I'll do whatever you guys want me to do. I'll do whatever.
Wait, is that one of the topics of the debate? Is free will?
Not this time. Free will is so important of a topic for me. I haven't thrown it into the gauntlet on purpose. I want to specify free will for like an hour-long conversation, like Saul is suggesting. 3v3 might be a little too much, right? Because y'all are going to be yelling at each other.
2v2, I mean 2v2, but in structure, because your structure is excellent.
Yeah, we can 2v2 it. That's fine, but three might be a little much. You might have to drop Bart, because I know you're going to pick Jordan over Bart.
No. I definitely, if I had to choose, then I would choose Bart.
Oh, okay. Jordan's out then.
Okay.
I mean, because like I think I've discussed with both of you guys my view on free will, because I'm a determinist and all that stuff. But like a lot of cases, I have no problem discussing it because I don't get upset about it. Like if you say, well, then you lose the ability to make choices. I'm like, yeah, that's fine. I accept that proposition to be true. I think that's a lot of times where people
then
get
everything is
upset.
good.
Yeah, no, yeah, and I think that's an issue with a lot of people when they debate, that they're told that they have to be a determinist if they're an atheist.
Yeah.
I do not hold that position. I think you can still believe in a free will and still believe that not a God exists.
Well, you would have to believe. You would be obligated to believe in the supernatural.
Oh, you can say that your chemical has like a processes that gives the ability to make choice or something. I mean, you could. I mean, I don't hold that position. So, I mean, I could probably sit down and articulate an argument for it, but it's not my actual position. And I have no problem accepting saying like choices isn't a real thing. It's just like a
How
reaction
do,
that comes with it.
so then, but then you
Yeah,
understand that everybody is a victim of their situation, right? So like,
yeah, I agree with that.
how do we punish anybody?
You
If
can still
if
punish
if the
people
man if the
because it's
man
irrelevant.
committing if the man
Yeah.
committing SA is equally as much of a victim as the individual he is SAing, who gets punished?
I don't think I would consider it as equally because I don't know how you do it a measurement for like
Well,
harm
they're
in
a
like
victim to
a
their
chemical.
situation. They can't
Well, I
control it.
agree there's still victims in it, but that's why we look at the situation that we have to prioritize the betterment of like humanity as a whole over the individual. That yeah, the person has now had to suffer for that their brain functions in a certain way that causes them to think that this is a not only a good position but it makes them attracted to do this. And so from there we have to say that this is harmful to society as a whole, so we would have to punish it under that premise to remove it from harming other human beings. So it's not a case
But then
of
this is just social utility, and like social utility has horrible reductios.
well, yeah, no, I'm not saying that like full social utility. I'm just saying that under the circumstances that like understanding that you're neurologically programmed to be what you're attracted to and what you desire and things like this, and that most likely this person.
But I think that's okay. Like I don't really care if Jesus is real or not, or if Jesus is God or not.
I know.
I have not heard a better like way for people who have these vices to escape these vices rather than believing in Jesus.
I
There are,
don't
there are a
think
variety of
they
different
are.
things that could be asserted. But Eric, you're coming from a place that's really you're coming from a very rational and logical place, and you're looking at it when you're looking at it. I think in a very like um, holistic way when it comes to one dimension about onus of responsibility. But the thing is that let's just say just consider if in fact the brain and biochemistry is the driving factor for decisions made, that means that all of the factors that influence that become the director for the individual itself. That means that medications, doctors, the environment, and those who are in control, we're essentially saying you guys are the purveyors of will itself collectively. And then who do we say is that it's okay? We're going to let the FDA essentially guide 65% of the will of the world. Like that's an
But
issue.
but are
Well,
you are you
I get what you're
just
saying.
this question and then Eric, go ahead. I just have a question. Anyone can respond, or Eric, you can just go ahead right away. Is this saying though that in order to believe in free will you have to have faith in it, or is there like some empirical claim to free will?
I wouldn't be able to answer that because I don't. I mean, there could be that I haven't seen anything. I just know of the neurological problem.
So there's two sides to it. So one would be this empirical claim that not free, but will is just simply a biological determinant based upon the disposition of one's physiology. And if that's the case, then all of the factors that influence that become the authors of individuals themselves. So then we would have to say, oh, if someone has some sort of maladaptive disposition societal wise, then the institutions and those organizations should be held responsible. We can't put the person in jail for having sociopathy. We now have to hold all of these other people or institutions responsible. So should they be going to jail? The other side would be the spiritual implication. It would say, oh, well, there's some sort of dimension outside of the physiology which is responsible, but that's also obviously non-empirical. So then how do you begin to even assess?
Right.
Sorry, I lagged for a minute. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah. Uh, so when it comes to like the understanding of it, like we can see certain parts of the neurological brain that causes certain effects that like we can understand like depression that we can actually examine it and see that it could be caused from certain neurological instances of like you're not getting enough dopamine that goes into neurosynapses, or we can look into people with like mirror neuron deficiencies that usually cause them to be sociopaths because they lose the ability to get certain types of empathy. We can look at a lot of neurological things that causes certain different reactions. We can also examine like attractionness and about the censoring of the firing on it. And so a lot of times, like people who are attracted to like the same sex, or even people who are attracted to probably even minors stuff like that, have these certain neurological processes that fire that causes them to be in this way, which it absolutely sucks. And that the case scenario that some of these people have these neurologically processed things. I agree with this, and but that's why I'm really big on the understanding this, that we might have to do certain cases where medicine is able to give the ability to get people less depressed, or it causes people to have other neurological things that can cause them to feel a certain way, and we have to go through and examine these routes. I do think that that is important because it does just these are things that cause the person to do certain actions.
Eric, have you seen that movie? It's an old movie, like 20 years or 30 years ago, called Gattaca.
Yes.
So what are your thoughts? Basically, for those who haven't seen it, it's a society in the future where science is able to essentially craft the biological individual using, methods for affecting DNA. So you can have a child that has no diseases, or has blue eyes, or has intelligence specific to, like, let's say math or science or what have you, and they can go ahead and essentially engineer people. If and or when society comes to a place where that is possible, what then would you personally hold as responsible for things that are bad, or that would be considered bad when it comes to a person making choice?
I'll be honest, I don't know. I'm going to tell you the truth. I don't know. Because once we get to that scenario, I mean, I'd have to sit down, run logical arguments with myself, because I do debate myself on these concepts. That's why I think one of the reasons why I don't get angry ever, and well, I have been angry in debates, but very rarely do I get angry, especially in good conversations like we're having now, is because I try to run and see what do I truly think about that. And I guess I've never really thought of that position. So I'd have to sit down and think. And so I can only give you the best. I don't know.
No, that's more than fair and very intelligent. At least that, I think, you see, that's the point. I think that's why debates are really good, because it inspires and causes people to actually think their position through, as well as to consider the alternatives, as opposed to just saying something without it being considered. So, I mean, the answer I would have also is that's a question mark. I don't know. That's I think a necessary question, though. If we're talking about free will from the perspective of an empirical, then it means that there are factors, and if we, to the extent that we can control those factors, those would be the responsible parties. And so, like, what does that mean?
I
No,
guess
and I
also
agree.
the the strategy of avoiding the semantic argument. Like, how do we get to the core of free will, this term, if we're going to talk about it, without getting bogged down in its definition? Like, what's the strategy for that, I guess?
You might not be able to. I mean, I'll be honest. Me and Saul have talked about even like consciousness, and we can't agree in full terms on just consciousness. And sometimes sometimes you have to understand that there's certain positions we're going to both hold that we're going to define in ways that both of us won't fully agree with. And that is still a possibly rational position to have. That both of us are going to look at things, say that I don't define it this way, I define it this way, under his definitional terms could mean something completely different than my definitional terms. And that's fine.
Yeah. The only issue with that is if you're asserting that free will exists, it's a positivist claim. So you have this like almost necessity in a way to get someone to at least see the, utility of the term as it pertains to reality. So it's on Saul to basically like convince us otherwise of this.
Yeah, but that's,
yeah.
I think, like, what you're saying is that's the most relevant thing. You've identified that, hey, you are the responsible party for presenting an argument because you are making a positive claim. And what
Yeah.
Eric is saying is also important because the definition that I hold in order to do that in many cases will be disagreed upon. So that to me is also progressive because at least we have some sort of a very clear delineation between why that I believe X and why you believe Y, and say, okay, our definition of consciousness or free will is fundamentally different. Then the question becomes, is there any objective premise in order to go to that level and of definition or to define it in an objective way? Then it leads the conversation, I think, forward, as opposed to just running around in a circle saying, hey, you know, the best car means Toyota. No, it doesn't. It means Prius. And you're like, what? You know, it's always this opposition.
Yeah, and especially in your case, because I feel like to a degree you and Shark were asserting it as like axiomatic to our whole I don't know, conscious realm, like free will. Without it, so many other things seem to collapse. So it seems axiomatic in its definition, in a sense. So defending that, it's not tough. I see where you guys are going with that, but I'm so tempted in so many directions to take it down the semantic way of like, well, what is free will, etc. And yeah, I'm curious as to the strategy to avoid that, because yeah, it's for my own sake now as well.
Oh, I think that road is a necessity. I think first there has to be at least the parsing of the semantical definition. When we're modifying will, first of all, so what is will? What does it mean? And then, okay, well, what makes it free or not free? And then what does that mean when we're talking about this within the context of an individual or a society or whatever? Then we at least can choose an avenue for a discussion and a debate. Oh, well, you know, you said that you believe that free will is something that is empirically based, but Saul is saying that free will is something that is both empirical and non-empirical. Well, let's debate that. Let's talk about that, or what have you.
Yeah,
Can,
yeah,
can we
exactly.
agree that libertarian free will is just a bunch of BS and go from there?
Oh no, because you know when
Oh,
I know the argument, and I have to say, like, that's why I said to you, I give you props. You were one of the people who, you and Mitch the scientist, definitely reformed my thinking when it comes to libertarian free will. And I agree that in a very platonic way, there is no such thing as a libertarian free will when we're talking about it in terms of this person is just making decisions outside of any influence and fully autonomously. Like that's not the case. But the deeper question becomes, who or what is the individual? Like to what logic, what he's saying, like what is the definition of individual to begin with in order for there to even be a designation as to whether or not that person's making a choice?
I can agree with you on that. I just saying that like because libertarian free will, some people derive that it's almost a necessity for like a Christian God. And for the sake of it is that they believe that if there is something that infringes on your ability to make choices, which is predestined and like, well, I guess not even word predestined, that like you're born with certain desires or implications to do certain choices, that then if God gave you this, was born in this, then that would be like a disadvantage compared to somebody who doesn't have these certain desires and stuff like this. And so this wouldn't be an all-loving God if you didn't make it a full even playing field. But at the same time, I don't think that there is any way you could argue for libertarian free will to be true with understanding any of the literature behind the concept of a free will or not.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree. I mean, essentially, there's like a lack of really considering the full ramification of what libertarian free will is asserting. If there's no way, there's always, even from a Christian perspective, there is sin, right? As a factor that is influencing a person's decision. And that's without question within their literature. Like, oh, because of sin, we do this, or it becomes difficult to do that, or we have the predisposition to do the opposite, Romans and all that stuff. So even within that context, there's no such thing as this person is completely autonomous or free from any coercive factors and is just, doing their thing. Like, that's not a thing. So I think at that level, yeah, you're right. There's no question about that. But when it comes to saying, yeah, but even when a person has some sort of a predisposition towards something, does that mean that that they're limited, that they have no power outside of that predisposition to change themselves? I would argue, no. That is the very premise of what will is. There are people who would say, hey, this is something that I'm prone to. I don't like it, and I'm going to change it. And they do.
Yeah, I agree with you. And so, like, this might even be super surprising. Yes, I am at the moment like a hard determinist, but as I hear more arguments, I could change my mind. I have no, it doesn't affect my view of a God or anything like this. That I have no issue with you saying if someone's like, yeah, libertarian free will is a bunch of BS, but we do make some type of choices while I'm under the belief that choice is an illusion. And like, if you came and eventually proved to me that no, we still do have some forms of choices, then I would be like, okay, cool. What can we do with it and all this stuff? It's not going to be like my world has been shattered. I'm going to have to re-pick up everything. It's just one piece of my worldview, not the worldview. So
And I hear that. I think for me, the reason why free will is so important is because this idea that we do not have the power to determine our thinking, our feelings, our life, then is an abdication of our power to all of the external powers that be. To me, it's a subversive way of saying everyone should be a slave, and here's a logical reason why they should give us the keys to control them. And that to me is a problem because when people, that's essentially what they're saying, especially I hear that a lot on TikTok. Oh, we don't have free will. Oh, we don't have free will. Oh, there is no free will. As though there's some sort of scientific basis for that, which there isn't. That's why I did that video. Like, no, science does not concur with that. Oh, well, everything's determined. No, there is no theory of determination for the universe. Number one, there just isn't. That is an assumption based on like classical physics, has nothing to do with quantum physics. Quantum physics says the opposite. Oh, well, we don't have the ability to make choices, from our brain. No, that's also a bias that, oh, everything is bottom up, that all of the things that come together, all of the basically, atoms and everything, they're moving in this way, which means it's just deterministic. No, there's top down, which means once you have some sort of emergent property, the properties of things that have come together, now there's something, question mark, that is determining those bottom things, the atoms and the cells and how those things work. That's also science. So to me, it just looks like here's a great way to tell the society, you don't have any power to do anything, so don't think about it. Just go along with the flow because you're just a biological robot. And to me, that is just slavery.
you want to hear? So you might think this is crazy. I, as a determinist, believe every single person should live as if free will is true, regardless if it's true or not. I actually do believe that. And the reason is this: if the concept of believing that you make choices is really a thing, the ability to even believe that you're making choices could direct you to do a good thing over a bad. If this is true, then I would rather you believe a lie, even if it's not. I mean, not if it's true or not. Is regardless. I'd rather you believe something that would make you more likely make a good choice with little repercussion than something that you would just believe. Well, I'm just a bunch of chemicals, therefore whatever I do is irrelevant. So most cases, I actually do believe that people should believe that they have free will and that they lead to better outcomes over someone who just would think they're just a bunch of chemicals and they just do whatever they desire. Because I don't think most humans have that ability to rationalize these concepts.
Okay, see,
Personally.
that to me, again, that's why I see your thinking as very balanced, because you're looking and saying there may be philosophical or logical arguments to the contrary of a libertarian perspective. But from a practical perspective, we have to live life in a way where we are responsible. So if we're going to be responsible, we have to approach it as though we do have the responsibility of choosing, and that there are choices, so that it's not just oh, whatever is what it just goes. I'm not gonna try to steer my car because whatever's gonna happen will happen. Like, come on, that just would be impractical.
Yes, I 100% agree. And I think that comes from not only me trying to like study and listen and learn, is that like I understand that as much as I want to believe something because it's true, I also want people to do things based on the betterment of humanity as a whole. I would rather people, even as I said, even if free will is true or if it's determinism, I would rather them believe something that leads to a better outcome for the vast majority of humans than to accept something that causes more harm. Because at the end of the day, if we make a choice or if it's determined, isn't going to cause knowing which one you actually do isn't going to be the end of the world. You can easily be that this should be a discussion like people like me and Saul have, that can be like a philosophical one as a discussion. But if it's altering the way that you perceive life in a way that you're like, well, if it's just all neurological, therefore it's okay for me to go like unalive babies because that's how my brain functions, then I would be like, no, free will exists. Just don't do that kind of stuff.
Right. See that, and that to me, so that is honestly my goal, is to at least bring those who are determinist to that type of a standard where there's not an abdication of total responsibility, regardless as to whether or not they see factors that are influencing the decisions that they are seemingly making. Because otherwise, we as a society would have grave problem. Not that we don't have problems now, but they would just be multiplied, and we don't need that. I think, need more people to take greater responsibility for themselves and for the circumstances that they find themselves in. I think there's a liberation in that.
Yes. I even had this discussion. I was talking to Brooke. He was trying to do well, there's no such thing as justice, determinism, and all this stuff. Then why are we allowed doing punishments? I do believe punishments, even in a determinist view, is a necessity because it causes the person to less likely to perform a bad outcome if there is a legal system. This decreasing in it is a betterment for humanity. So yeah, does it suck for the individual? Yeah. And this is a person who's actually dealt with the prison system. I understand, and there is people who do bad things, and so they're neurologically more programmed to do this because their ideas of what's good and bad are in the concepts different than like what me and you would say this is a good and this is bad. They won't agree with you. They can actually justify unaliving individuals based on this person stepped on my shoe, so therefore he disrespected me, and so he deserved to be unalived. And we have to think in the betterment of humanity as a whole. We have to do something about this, regardless if that's a byproduct of their non-neurological brain or free, whatever it is. We have to still say we have to do something, and the threat of doing something can, even determinist view, cause it to be less likely for you to do thus action. So that's how I usually just bring it.
Okay, there's two things I want to say. First thing is, it could be twisted in the opposite direction, where someone who learns about free will then feels like they can go ahead and do anything. especially if they aren't under the assumption that society somehow is moving in a better direction, or there's some sort of direction that we're trying to move society in, right? If they lose hope of that and they don't believe in a general direction and they believe in their own free will, that often leads to, you know, psychopathic tendencies. Um, the other thing I would say is that I I think that the assumption, right, and this is one of the problems with Eric's point, is that if you think it's utilitarian just to believe in free will, right? Well, there's that's still under this assertion that, well, society has a general direction towards the good, and if there's a central planner that regulates that good, the general direction of society, what that is really doing is asserting the central planner's will onto, right, the free will of the general society. And so it's an ironic statement to to try to justify that dissonance, right? Like, how dare one claim that we don't have free will, but at the same time claim that there's a general tendency of society to move towards the good and that they're the ones who need to regulate that to happen. It's like, well, no, obviously, if you believe that, then the general movement of the society should be left to the free will of the society, not your will.
So, what are you making a distinction between a society
Well,
determination and
libertarian free will goes hand in hand with, like, this distinction of a citizen's right to their own will rather than a central planner's will or a regulator's will. So these notions that people shouldn't be punished, it's not about punishment as much as it is about justifying regulation. Like,
oh,
you see,
oh.
because yeah, of course our regulations aren't impeding on the free will, the liberty. No one says that if we put murderers behind bars that's impeding on anyone's libertarian free will, you know?
Okay, so you're making, okay, which is, okay, a very, very valid point. What you said is the truth. It's not about the freedom of will, it's about the justification of conformity. So within the society, you do something outside of the agreed upon good, then there's a justification to abdicate or to impose the collective will on that individual.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you're right. And so what axiom we take here, like when Eric tried to say, well, I don't really believe full-heartedly in free will, but everyone should act as though, I could see the utility of it. Well, it's like, but everyone has to actually believe in it. They can't just use it as a utilitarian notion, because that's not enough. Don't you see? That's not enough. It won't function in the right way if it's just utilitarian. It must be applied. What the utilitarian approach will look like a centrally planned government imposing tyrannically their own notions of what is good, rather than, you know, um, rather than sanctifying each individual's own free will. If free will is the axiom with which we're moving upon, then enforcement of our principles, regulation becomes really easy, because we're using individuals' free will as our marker, our axiom of what is justifiable in regulation. If we don't hold free will, to Eric's kind of like dissonant point, right? If you don't hold free will, well, then we lose all the utility of regulation. It becomes a tyrannical regime.
So not necessarily. I was speaking with Mitch the scientist some time ago about this, and he did open my mind to the consideration that if we look at a response to the breaking of the law, not as punishment, but as a collective responsibility for reformation
Yes.
and redirection, then it becomes just that, a collective responsibility. Why is this person the way they are? we as a collective society have a lot to do with that. And we also have the power to redirect that. And so instead of saying, well, this person has a predisposition towards this activity that's bad, we recognize it and then say, we must now help to either heal this person or to place this person into an environment that will be best for both parties. So, okay, and this is controversial, okay? I'm going to be very careful. Imagine you have a person who has a predisposition for things that are bad, bad as in bad with people that are minors. And this person's disposition towards that is something that the society cannot change psychologically, physiologically, physically. So instead of just placing this person into a box circumstance to suffer, our current jail system, we put this person into a into a dreamlike state, let's say, and within that state, they're living their life within their own dream or whatever. Okay, a lawyer comes up and says to the court, this person wants to indulge in their predisposition within the state that they're in because, one, it is not a detriment to society and therefore, and is hurting no one. Would you, as the judge, allow such a thing to happen?
It's a really good question. I would have to think about this one for a second. There's a lot of deep analogies in there too. So obviously my impulse is to be like, no, that's like, but I got to think about it more deeply, I guess, than that.
Right. And I know that because we want to say, number one, at surface, it's like, oh, so then, Saul, are you saying that you are for that? No, I'm not. But what I am recognizing is that what am I really, as a person of society, what am I really saying? Am I imposing my will that such a thing being abhorrent is abhorrent because it's disgusting to me, or because it's detrimental to the persons in society?
This is why I talked about Eric's point on the assumption of like where the society is moving towards the good. The reason he said, well, I don't believe in free will, but I think it could be utilitarian too for someone to believe in it. It's for the betterment of society. So that makes an assumption that so the free will is also going hand in hand with a trajectory of society. We can't have free will on its own because free will is this relationship of our choices in society. There's a duality there with what we're doing with our free will, right? And how that relates to, because our free will is integrated with society, like you're saying. I don't entirely know where I'm going with that, but
I see. That's where there becomes, I think, a clarity in terms of what we're really doing. Are we as a society saying people should feel this way or people's will should be this? Or are we saying as a collective society that for the betterment of the majority, there are certain things that will be precluded, that will be not allowed, that the collective free will overshadow an individual's free will? There's a distinction there, because if in fact a person says, look, I'm in my own dream reality state, and in that dream reality state, in my own mind, I should be free to choose to do whatever it is that I want to do. Well, is that okay? And the answer should be, if it's objective, the answer should be, well, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. On
The
another
only
level, we'd be like,
the
oh,
only
are we advocating for this then?
Yeah, because the issue here is that I don't know how much you can separate this idea or this notion of of free will and choice without also inserting like the good towards the good. Like um right, because so like my tendency would be like, yeah, he might have some sort of will. It sounds more like he has a will to do something. This person has a will to go into a dream state and imagine horrific things, but that's not free will. Like free will is going hand in hand, because the word free is suggesting this like tangent or this vector towards the good. So for instance, this is what I'm thinking about. This is the thought experiment. If I had to test whether someone had free will or not, right? They want free will, and I want to test whether they have free will. Well, I'm going to ask them if they believe in the good. And questions that lead me to horrific images are not going to lead me. Those are going to lead me to red flags. Those aren't Those are more like regulatory instances. Those aren't instances of liberating someone's free will. Those
Wow.
aren't right.
You
Those aren't instances where you want to liberate someone's free will towards the good through society.
well, you have made freedom of will synonymous with the good. And
Right.
that connection is one that I would say is not a complete measure of freedom of will. So
Okay,
just because a person is not
Eric
about the good,
had to assume it. Eric had to assume it, right? That was the issue.
he
He
assumed,
agreed.
he assumed, I don't think that he assumed, I think, and Eric, if you're here, correct me if I'm wrong, I think
Yeah, I'm
he's
here.
saying that the collective society is looking towards what is, quote, the good from that perspective, but not from an absolute perspective of the good, meaning that an
Yeah.
individual may have preferences or what have you. And if they want to, on that level, it's a subjective, the good or the bad.
Yeah.
But
No, I agree. Yeah.
Yeah, but that's where I'm kind of, I guess, pushing back. It's like, is there room there to wiggle? Is there room within someone's free will to wiggle towards the bad? And
is it free
not
if they can only go towards what is considered the good, and any opposition to that, that to me would be the measure of the freedom. If I tell I know I'm going to say her name, if I tell Alexa to do something and the system argues with me, I would then realize, okay, now I'm dealing with an opposition to the will that I've inserted. So that would say, oh, suddenly there would be news reports that Alexa is alive. She'll argue with you or change plans or do whatever according to a will that is in opposition. If there isn't an opposition, how is it free?
I mean, so I would even argue that at this moment in society, we live life as if some type, even if I'm not saying libertarian free will, I could be some kind of compatibilist, that we do have neurological things that cause us to be predispositions for certain things like what we desire as love and all this stuff in certain aspects. That society, we do this, and that we do believe that choice is a real thing, that if you have an apple or a pear, that you actually physically choose the apple or the pear. So I think in society we kind of do that. And I think we do it because it gives us a better feeling that when we have options, that we are expressing a choice of one's own want over saying that it's just a neurological process. And so, and like in my worldview, there isn't this choice that really happens, that it is like a mirage, that this this isn't a real thing, but we do believe it's a real thing, even though it's not. And I think that that's just how society normally does, is that we try to believe that when we have multiple different positions, that we can physically choose one over another. And my full belief is that you don't choose one over another. It's a neurologically processed thing that automatically drives which one you have, and so choice isn't a real thing. Does that kind of make sense?
Eric, are you a soft determinist?
No, I'm a hard determinist. I just if you came to me and argued soft determinism, I think that we would agree on everything except most cases. Is you would say that there you do make some choices, and I say I think you just make an illusion of choice, and I have no idea how you would separate that.
I was
And
just
so
gonna say, I don't know how would we know whether or the distinction between illusion of choice and actual choice?
absolutely, I mean, I'm a hard determinist, but at the same time, I don't sit there and be like, I don't think it's impossible for you to convince me, make me a soft determinist.
Right.
But I think, how do you prove that the choice you made was an actual choice you made, or that it's an illusion of a choice? I have no idea.
That's where I
Here,
get weirdly bogged down in like the good, because it seems as though we have this tendency in our culture, or this general like superstition, that if the if it's towards the good, that's somehow more of a choice than all of the bad things that seem somehow more determined, or we give a little more empathy and leeway, right? Like if someone goes from yelling and arguing abusively to calmly talking to fixing the situation to then generously, like, you know, solving someone else's problem, they've that seems more evidence towards them consciously making a choice versus someone just destructively get going into like an angry circle. I don't know if that makes any sense, but our
it
measurement seems
does.
to be through this morality of good and if we don't have any parameters of good and bad, then choice and free will does seem to get lost in just subjective notions.
But here's the thing: if you have an individual who is given is presented with a series of options to choose from, then there is a limitation. It's not the limitation is the choices that are presented. But if you have the ability, or the one who has the ability to create the choices themselves, that without restriction, then we would say that is the determination between the illusion of choice and really the choice maker. And when I say choice maker, I mean that in the most literal sense. I am creating choices that can be determined apart from or chosen, as opposed to I am the person that is viewing the choices available and then selecting one. The choice maker is truly that FREE in all caps, because that would be freedom. There would be no prior criteria or basis that would be limiting. It would say, I'm an artist, and so I can paint anything. But whatever
And
is within the painting itself is limited to the stuff that the artist has done.
and you're saying that's regardless of the direction. They could take that in any direction they want.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm skeptical of
That
that.
not taking it, but there's a difference between. So I have to like elevate it above. Here's the metaphysical part. It would say the character within. Okay, to make it simple, you're playing a video game, and the person who's playing the game is limited to the options that the programmer has provided within the game. The programmer, though, is not limited according to what's within the game. The programmer is literally creating the choices that the players can make in the game. So if we were to ask, well, who's truly free pertaining to the game, it would be the programmer and not the
But
player.
okay,
That's
okay.
pseudo
See,
analogous
At this
because
point,
in this phrase.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead, Al.
I'll be quick. I was just gonna say, at this point, I've thought about it. I've literally sat with myself and had a conversation in my head with myself, I'm like, okay, I'm gonna think of a few things, and I'm going to pick one of those things, and like as it's happening, I'm just like, okay, I'm talking with myself. Here I am, and I just thought of things, and then made a decision in my head, and so I'm like, okay, it's real enough to me. Boom, I have some kind of free will. I'm just like tired of like saying that I don't when it feels like I do. So I'm just gonna go with like I have it, and I don't think it's necessarily incompatible with naturalism. I don't see the contradiction or whatever. God could not be real, and nature could probably still produce something with agency, because it's pretty strong evidence that like even if there are things that are like predispositions, we can still choose things. So it's like if that's what free will means, then I guess I have free will in that sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I said I think what we're going to run into is how do we determine if the choice you made is just an illusion or if you truly believe it. The reason I am a hard instead of a soft is just because that I can see the neurological processes that occur that causes you to be able to make certain determining choices, and so yeah, if you showed me how I can like test it that I wouldn't know how, then yeah, I could probably be convinced of soft determinism. But I mean, like if you came to me like libertarian free will exists, then we're really going to fight. But when it comes down to the case scenario that you believe you're making a choice, I believe that the choice that you're having an illusion of a choice.
Even if it's my brain, even if my brain is me, my brain is making it, something is making it, and I mean, it feels like I'm making it, so I'm just gonna say I'm making it. But I get the technically, yeah.
Yeah,
That's why
like,
I say
yeah.
I couch it as like I think we are in a deterministic universe. It's just in order to like know the outcome of any given thing, the amount of variables you would have to go track is impossibly large. So it feels as though it's functionally random, right? We interact with the system as though it is undetermined, although like on its most finite level it most likely is determined, because I can't see anything in the universe that isn't just matter interacting with matter in different mattery ways, right? And that includes our brains. Even when like we're talking about brain states, like you're just sitting there talking to yourself, like you're having your inner monologue, making decisions, like it just complete theater of the mind, right? That is just still biochemical responses happening inside your head.
Yeah, but
I go back and forth every day on this, because there are times, like along with my mental illness comes
just be agnostic.
I'm gonna be, yeah, pretty much. I have like an impulsive nature sometimes with my emotions, so I'll get like angry really quickly and then like blow up on something or someone, and be like, what the fuck? I didn't want to do that at all. Just fucking happened. Feel really bad afterward. Whatever. I didn't like actively choose to do that. But then there are other times I'm like, okay, I totally made that choice. So it's like, I don't know.
Well, like to me,
I
that's
have
just kind of
to
like an
comment on that.
illustration. Okay, go ahead.
Oh man, it's so funny that you went with the word illustration, because I was thinking about a painter the difference between a painter who just throws the paint like a child onto the canvas versus one that intentionally utilizes complicated techniques to achieve some sort of illustration. Does one have more or less free will than the other? I would say the one who is controlled and utilizing techniques has more free will than even sort of the postmodernist who intellectualizes just throwing paint on the canvas, unless perhaps they've in themselves articulated the techniques sufficiently, right? Like until you are actually literate in the process, in the methodology, you can't really critique it. You're not really free, right? You don't understand what you're even looking at. And that's why my impulse is towards the good. That free will has this notion of towards the good. And to Skeptical's point, when you get irrational, and I was going to say I appreciate you even just I know that's kind of vulnerable of you to just say that, that it's hard to control your emotions sometimes. I really actually appreciate that vulnerability. I'm not trying to virtue signal there. I never say sentences like that, but I just genuinely feel that because I struggle with that too, and that's why I have this impulse again towards the good. Because what I notice is when I neglect, right, when I neglect my choices, things will implode and move towards the bad. It seems as though my free will does have this tether towards the good. When I'm choosing towards the good, right? Things organize themselves. And when I choose to relax, right, step back from a disagreement with an important person in my life and calm myself down, that seems to be a choice, like a difficult choice, not an easy one. It's got to be a choice because like I'm stepping outside of myself amongst all my impulses, about all my urges, and choosing, oh, I'm not going to believe all these thoughts in my head right now. I'm going to calm myself down. No, what I'm thinking isn't rational. Even though I want to keep asserting my true claims, they're not as true as they might think they are right now. So calm myself down. And this is an example, again, towards the good. I'm using good and bad as an internal bias measurement to know whether or not my free will is like or my choices, if you want to use that word, are like in line with my own trajectory, if that makes sense.
So, well, what I was going to bring up is like I
Yeah.
feel like Al's point illustrates something useful there, right? I think you would say that you feel like things are just already determined or not in control when like your emotions just run rampant and you blow up, right? Like you would say that those aren't active choices
Yeah,
that
as
those are
it's
making. Like that just
happening,
happens, right?
yeah, as it's happening, I'm not actively choosing to do that.
Yeah.
It just happens, and I obviously
Totally.
I'm in therapy, and like there are ways to work on this behavior,
Yeah.
but but then I think, okay, those times I am choosing to think about my thoughts, analyze them, blah blah blah. Like, is that a choice? Like, I don't know. Sometimes I feel like I do choose
So,
things. Other times
well,
it's like
well,
I'm
well,
not.
here's what I was gonna say is like I think that illustrates what I was trying to get at, or Eric and I were trying to get at pretty well. But like you would say, like clearly at this point in time, this just feels like not too right? Like, and it's easy to know in that moment. Hey, that's just a thing that's happening. It's not something that I'm in control of or desire, right? I don't know
Yes.
why the complexity of me thinking about something changes whether or not it is a determined outcome, right? Because something becomes more complex and I'm actually going through multiple levels of analysis to get there, I don't know why it's not still just biochemical responses calling to other chemical responses based off of whatever chemicals are available at that time, right? Like one is just a more like it is just easier to notice is a direct cause on you. The other one feels like you have choice available, but I can't actually see like if we're like looking at the neuroscience of it, I can't actually see where there is this. I'm going to use mystical here for lack of a better word, mystical free will or choice entering into the equation.
Yeah, but Jack, here's the thing. Ultimately, let's assume that the perspective in regards to the predetermination and the is just true. Then there's a direct correlation between everything that is emergent and the fundamentals that these emergent things come from, right? So if that's the case, then we would have to say, well, from the fundamentals, what is the nature, the fundamental characteristic for how these things interact and why they do that? They just do. Like they're at a point we just come and say, well, this is just the way it is. It's just a hard fact that when there's one thing and there's another thing, there's two things. There's not much else to think about. It's just there. Then it means that the very nature of the system that is recognized at its most fundamental, if there's nothing else there, that means that it doesn't have any predetermined factor, something else that makes it what it is. That would be the very definition of free. It means that the fundamental nature doesn't have any prerequisite. And if it doesn't have a prerequisite, then it
Well,
is free.
I don't know that I agree with that. I don't know that brute facts are free, right? Like any more than
What's
I
a
don't think like an
prerequisite?
electron is free. It just is what an electron is, right? Like
No,
I
no,
don't
not
think brute
but the
facts are
electron.
make. Hang on, I know, but the brute facts are just what they are. They don't get a choice to be anything else, right? Like so, if we're talking about like an axiomatic truth, like the law of identity, right? A thing is itself. It doesn't seem to me like there's any free agency there in that. It just is a brute fact.
Yeah, you're right. But you're looking at that again, that would be that's so if you say an electron or you say the law of identity, you're looking at something that is still an accumulation of other brute facts. When we come down to the nature of the most fundamental brute facts, those things
Well,
don't
that's what I'd say. Like, I would say like the law of identity is probably like one of the most fundamental brute facts of our universe. Like the law of identity, the law of non-contradiction. Like these things seem to be just like intrinsically tied to the nature of reality. Like they just seem to be part of it, right? And I don't know
Okay,
that
so
I have the
let's
language or the
assume
knowledge
let's assume it.
to
Let's
like
assume it. Let's say that
articulate that appropriately.
okay, that's fair. Let's just assume that like the law of identity as a fundamental brute fact. You would say what you just said is, well, the law of identity isn't making a choice. You're right. The law of identity is not making a choice. It is the foundation then, from a logical perspective, for any and all options available. And if that's since that's the case, if it's the foundation of any and all options available, now we're not talking about choices being made because that's a linear thing, right? We're saying that the law of identity being the foundation of all options and all available expressions, logic, reason-wise, that means that it is above and beyond a choice to be selected from, which then makes it, again, something that is not limited, like, oh, it has a free will. It would be the will of reason.
Except I don't see how that follows. Like that just feels like you're waxing poetic about it, right? Like
No.
it's not will.
It
Like
follows.
it's not the will, right? Like it just is.
No.
Like
And within
again,
reason,
like
within
no more than a
within your
glue on is a
construct.
glue on. It just is.
No. I agree. No, let's go back to what you are saying. You're saying if we're looking at logic, and we say here is a fundamental law of logic, and it's the law of identity that A is A. This fundamental law then literally is the foundation for all other logical constructs. Therefore, that law of identity that A is A doesn't make a choice. It's not moving, but serves as the foundation for anything. A reasonable mind like Saul is one mind, one small aspect of logic, expression, emergent. Then I'm making choices because, oh, I'm going to choose the apple over the pear. And this is an apple and that's a pear. In order for me to do that, the foundational law of identity is there, which means that the law itself, literally, logically speaking, is above choice making and becomes the platform for all choices that can be made, which from that perspective would be will itself within the context of logic.
Okay, I'm following you and in agreement with you until you say it is will itself. Like at that point in time, like that just feels like you're tacking on an agency to it or a desire or like a I don't know, a divineness to it. And like at that point I just disagree. Like that just feels like waxing poetic, like I said. Like there's no reason for me to make the extra bound other than just saying it is what it is.
So definition is important. So when I say will itself, I'm not talking about some agent that is now imposing or choosing, nothing like that. When I say will itself, I mean a foundational construct.
It's immutable. It's required.
Yeah, it is the fundamental requirement for fundamental construct for any and all things within that category. So within the category of reason, we would say that the law of identity serves as one of those premises, and so therefore it is the grounding of what can be chosen or why and how there are options to choose from. So therefore, within that context is when I say that is will, because you're being very specific, right? I'm not trying to go into the universal of it, just saying in that context. If that is the case, if we apply that to the other basis of things that are fundamental, then we come to this aggregate of like, okay, this is will, quote unquote, itself.
I mean, I just think you use silly words for it, but I don't think that we're ultimately disagreeing.
Wait, so Jack and
Like,
Eric.
the reason I push back on the language that you use is oftentimes people will do those kinds of things to slip in, like they'll use that kind of language to smuggle. Damn it.
Probably got a call.
Someone has birds in the background, and it's very nice.
But Jack, to what Jack's point is, I get it. It's usually like some way to smuggle in God or to smuggle in some sort of a spiritual theme, but I'm literally not intending anything like that. Just the data itself, to the extent like if we're just looking at a program and I say, yeah, well, the foundation of programming as far as it pertains to computer systems would be math. So in that context, math would be the fundamental reality or will, meaning here are the things that can and cannot be done because this is what is the determining basis. That alone, that's it.
Eric,
He must have got a phone call. Yeah.
do you think that a brain, chemical reactions, occurring in the brain, do you think that the only way those can produce free will is if they were created, if the brain was created to have that specific
No.
purpose?
What do you mean created? Like by an outside entity?
Yeah, like by a god.
Or
Like it wasn't just
no,
natural
no.
evolution.
No, I actually don't see a contradiction in being like a soft determinist or something. I'm the only issues, the biggest ones I have issues with, is like a libertarian free will. To me, that is like a load of pile of crap.
Stupid, yeah. Okay.
And yeah, but yeah, if you came to me and said that like there is some things that have some determining factors, like your ability to which what you have one desires. So like if your sexual orientation or your favorite food or like certain things that you have, certain things that are naturally goes, but you when it comes down to it, it just limits to a choice A, B, and C. But at the end, you have the ability to choose A, B, and C, while the other stuff is removed by other determining factors. I mean, I don't see why that would thus mean a God exists. I don't.
Yeah, like this a definition that I've been hearing of free will recently is the ability to do otherwise. And I had heard a different definition. I thought philosophy says that it's the ability free will is the ability to make a choice without any external factors like influencing that or something like that.
That's
So
libertarian
those are
free
two
will.
different things.
Eric, I have a
Yeah.
quick
So
question. A quick question
yeah.
that I'm going to bounce.
Yeah.
Do you think
Of course.
it would be question begging from the perspective of an assertion that it's a God's will that made everything? When we're if the question is what is free will, associating it to a God, I don't think answers that question. It's just begging the question. Oh well, God's free will. It hasn't answered. What is your thought in that regard?
Oh, I agree, 100%. I actually think asserting a God, it complicates it even more. So, personally,
Okay.
it's just
I agree. Because to say because Al, your question was like, do you think it's possible that a brain can have would have to be made essentially by some sort of like a God or whatever in order for this free will thing to be there? And then my thought was like, yeah, but if this God has a free will, still it hasn't answered the question. Well, what the hell is freedom of will? It's just something possessed.
Yeah. The only reason I ask that is because theists or Christians are constantly telling me that free will couldn't come from just natural evolution processes.
Yeah,
So So
Well,
that's why
libertarian
I
free will
asked.
just doesn't make any sense. But
Yeah.
yeah, you can have a soft determinist, and I see no reason.
They will
There's a
point out rationality, logic, those things cannot exist. Oh no, he left. Yeah, but yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
yeah, he was about to head out. Yeah, yeah, because me and Saul always have good conversations, just because like when we just disagree with stuff, we just disagree, and we're like it's usually definitionally, and then we'll just continue go. But the reason why I see no contradiction in it is because you can theoretically create a system that is naturally occurring that causes the ability to make alternate choices, and consciousness itself would be the derivative point that causes this. And I don't see a logical contradiction. I said, to me personally, at the moment, I'm a hard determinist, but there's been many cases that I've had a position and have, over periods of time and discussions, have altered my position. So I could end up in like 5 years be a soft determinist, but I think my background asserts more to a hard determinist on things I've seen in my life, and I also believe that with seeing like the neurological scans, I don't know how do we derive that this thing, it was a choice, or was this just a natural like even when you were discussing like you were able to step back, and even though you had these different urges to do this and you felt irrational, I believe the overcoming of it was from desires to overcome it, overcame the desires to not overcome. And so I usually, when I do it, it's based on like a metric system that your brain automatically processes and calculates what is the most desirable outcome over the others. And it compares like things that harm will make something go further down over something that goes up by less reduction, less things that could cause harm and stuff. Like, so your brain automatically processes these things, already makes the choice, and then under certain circumstances in society can raise and lower these probabilities of you wanting to do these desires, and causes you to act differently based on different outside source forces. Does that make a little bit of sense?
Yeah, I get what you're saying. Yeah,
Yeah.
I flip
And
flop all the time.
I see no issue with flip flopping. I actually think most people should be agnostic. I think where a lot of people sit there, yeah, like a risk reward ratio in a way, yeah. I think I mean it goes a little more into that, but yes, like a risk reward. But I think a lot of people believe when they become like atheists that they have to just scrap all free will, go straight into determinism, but they don't know what it really is. And I think that's just a very common thing. They're like, okay, Christianity's wrong, so therefore all concepts of any type of free will must be discounted. So,
Right.
and it, like also they all say that you have to have a subjective morality, and I'm like, I don't see that. I'm not an objective moralist. I'm not a moral realist, but like that's irrelevant. I don't see why you have to automatically assert morality subjective because you grew up as a Christian and just told morality's objective. I don't. I think people need to examine each position differently and give justifications and counter arguments to their own, and see if they're willing to accept the hard truths in many different things, as much as they're willing to understand that you don't have to sit there and say I'm a Christian, therefore morality I'm not a Christian no more, therefore morality is subjective. That you can still believe that like God doesn't exist, but you can have like a Platonist view on morality and still be an atheist. And so I think that's I think people hold positions because they're told they need to hold a position, and that's
Yeah.
counterproductive.
Yeah, that was like me for a while just because I didn't really understand this stuff though. But I'm learning a lot now as I've changed a lot of my views that were like viewed as controversial or I thought were, but really aren't.
My thoughts are going
Yeah, and I
to.
think that's like
So go ahead.
necessary.
I'm enjoying this conversation. My thoughts are going to how. I don't know if I'm being biased here, but like the natural progression of evolution seems towards the good. The risk and reward calculus, our bias, that's how we determine again sort of like morality and what is good. That seems to be coming from within us. That's not something societally generated. Seems like we have a intuition along with nature towards some sort of vector of we're assuming it's good, I suppose. Like if we were to assume it was bad, then all of a sudden I feel like we lose the functionality of these systems of rationality. Does that make any sense?
Absolutely. And I even argue so no one does anything with the assertion that they're doing bad. You could argue later that they did something's bad, but every single person's actions they believe they have good justification for it. So the person who owned other human beings in like 1840s had moral justifications why it was good to own other human beings. And we have to that's why I agree that like presentism is a thing in a subjective worldview. And I do believe that we must live the most moral position that we can hold based on our understanding of the world around us. But I also accept that I could hold a position today as moral and in 20 years find out it was not the most moral position and be willing to accept and change my position based on the data and evidence to demonstrate otherwise.
Yeah, so like thinking of it from a societal level, if we were central planners trying to direct society the right way, one argument could be that we want to popularize rationality. We want to get everyone thinking as clearly for themselves as possible so they're not just overridden with their impulses. This ability to what you said, change their theories 20 years later, their moral intuitions 20 years later, um, through this process of like, rationality and deduction. And that seems to be inherently like good. If we weren't putting that forward and it was just all arbitrary, then even the evolutionary claim of this just like rationality just sort of being a result of determinism wouldn't really hold, because it seems as though there's because of okay, I hope I can really bring it full circle here. Morality is a fluid thing that's guiding us. Our orientation towards morality, even in its ineffability, right? It's an inability to articulate it perfectly what moral good is. That nonetheless is what we are striving towards. And if we lose sight of that, then there's no hope for our evolution. There's no hope for humanity. So like this spiritual aspect outside of determinism seems to cut like it seems to be foundational to like the scientific and rational method. Like again, going back to this idea of centrally planning a society for the better. Well, if I wasn't going to popularize rationality so that everyone could have the quote unquote free will to be able to think for themselves and get themselves out of their own problems, another solution would be me just tyrannically solving all the problems for them, not teaching them anything, right? Basically fishing for them, not teaching how to fish.
A
And so
beneficent
if we,
dictator.
yeah, so how do we stand on the stilts of things like logic and rationality without this a superstition is what it is towards the good?
Well, I I postulate now that, well, at least it was required in, it may even still be required for where we're at in human development. But I think as we progress societally, socially, intellectually, those requirements for that may no longer be there. Like we may intellectually evolve out of the requirement of having a spiritual desire for good, and we can rationalize ourselves into it. But like that's a huge undertaking that requires education on a level that's like we still couldn't even fathom, right? Like that requires the dissemination of information that's like and like a universal agreement upon these kinds of things, because like even in our society where we are now, we don't have like people wanting to understand or look at these questions the way that we look at them, right? Like my wife, I love her to death. She could not care less about these kinds of conversations.
Same here.
Like they're just inconsequential to her. She's like, yeah, the good is just what the good is, right? She's like, whatever causes the least amount of harm is what ultimately I'm going to tend towards. And she's like, I don't feel the need to sit down and rationalize that for hours at a time. Meanwhile, my brain's like, hey, we should logically sit down and think about these kinds of things, because otherwise, what's the point of it all?
For sure, for sure. My concern about like something like determinism taking away free will is that it loses sight of things like the good. Because even with something like AI or your projection there of like a futuristic society that doesn't need well, you didn't say they would need logic, they just don't need this idea of the good, is what you're kind of saying, right?
They don't need the spirit. They don't need it in a spiritual sense, right?
You're
Like
right. Or like
it would be,
superstitious.
yeah, it wouldn't need to be superstitious for the good, right?
Right.
Like it would be derived from a desire for human beneficence, and
Yeah,
well,
yeah,
maybe
yeah.
not even just human beneficence, but like maybe just goodness, like whatever we did, whatever we can rationalize goodness to be, that in like creates the most beneficial circumstance for
Yeah.
all parties, the planet included, right?
Yeah, and I'm like hesitating on that notion, even though I totally understand it. It's a cool sci-fi novel, but for
Sure is.
me,
It's
it's
a
like,
great. It's like a sweet solar punk novel.
but for me, I hesitate on it. I'm like, I don't know if logic and rationality can function that way without purely without superstition, without this sort of like, yeah, like bi without bias, without bias. I don't think it's possible. In a way, the human notion is this integration of our own bias or our own perspective on things. And I think these tools ultimately, even though they look shiny and fancy in computers and capable, I think they're limited because of this very lack of superstitious intuition. Also, I think that our own technological advances hinge on our intuitive nature, our ability to tap into things like spirituality and how they function. Like our rationality, our math, our science hinges on our spirituality. What I mean by spirituality, and I know that you kind of like clarified it, but is like this notion towards the good, the bias, this superstitious belief that we're going somewhere with this. You know, that there's a vector, there's a tangent. Humanity's going towards the good. We're going to the stars, whatever the metaphor is. Without that, I fear none of the tools even have relevant applications. So it's that's concerning to me. Like another sci-fi novel I see is a bunch of broken computers and robots that no one knows how to fix. Everyone thought had high hopes of it solving all the problems, but in reality, they just kind of like wasted away and became, it's sort of the Idiocracy story.
Yeah.
Idiocracy. Have you ever seen that movie?
That's
Yeah,
such a
Yes.
sort
good
of that.
movie.
Yeah, so
So
good, right?
historically, I think you're definitely correct on this. Like I think you just like that is a true thing in history. But I don't know. See, the thing is, I look at humanity and I look at our history, and I'm like, I always feel like the bent of humanity is to progress from where we were. We are informed by our history, but I don't know that we're defined by it, right? Like, I don't think that things that have been always must be.
Yep.
Yeah,
And
I
like maybe
agree.
that's just an optimistic viewpoint for me to take, and maybe it's naivete and it's banking on human compassion to outweigh greed and selfishness. But like, if I can foresee a future where like if we overcome resource demand, what would stop us from beneficence? Like what would be the benefit if we have all resources if we have all resources necessary to provide everyone with a better means of life, and we just do
Yeah,
things for altruism? Why would we
yeah.
not do it?
It could be just this spiritual ability. What if we all end up fighting over how to save everyone? Imagine, right? Everyone basically gets so affluent that that the wars become about how to fix the poverty that doesn't exist, kind of thing. It's this without spirituality, you hit right, a consumerist or a materialist limit. Spirituality is kind of that next phase of, again, intuitive superstition, where you start believing a little more in things that aren't empirical and giving them a little more weight, even though our academic institutions don't like those kinds of methods. It's not, see, you got to be careful. You do need to be careful, because I hate dogma, right? I hate dogma. But in our lives, there's so many difficult parts of our lives that are inexplicable, that need this relief, that need us to be in touch with dissonance. Spirituality, a lot for me, has to do with like relieving rationality and sort of like, kind of relaxing your assumptions. I find it a practice of rationality. Like deductive logic is one of relaxing your assumptions. So like it's
Hmm.
a spiritual exercise, because like you having to falsify your own assumption, basically nullify all your thoughts to the point where you don't get any thoughts. It's kind of meditative in a way, you know? And in that sense, we're not going about empiricism. So I think that there's this important part to rationality that is locked in the spiritual realm, that has to do with like excavating your bias, cleansing yourself of your of using superstition to cleanse yourself of your bad superstitions. You have to have a baseline superstition though, which is that the method works, or that again society's moving towards the good, those kinds of things. If you're nihilistic and you think you're in existential crisis, you think nothing's meaningless, society has you as a slave, most likely you're also going to be very irrational. Even though you're making truth claims that sound so smart, and you're running yourself into doing research, finding things that are fairly true about conspiracies, you're still fairly irrational, because you're dogmatically talking at people. Like you go to your dinner table at Thanksgiving, you're telling everyone about how the two towers was a hoax and no one wants to hear it.
Yeah.
It's like, even if you're true, even if what you're saying is true, you're going about it non-spiritually and non-rationally. And this, again, like a futuristic culture, like I picture very, I think we all kind of do, utopian, like spiritually utopian, right? Like in the sense of like everyone being very conversational, generous, gratuitous, patient, non-irritable, trustworthy, loyal, those kinds of things. And then I picture the technology and affluence flourishing. But without those kinds of things, like what does the affluence mean if we all just have $7 coffee cups in our hands, driving Lamborghinis, cutting us all off in traffic angrily, right? That
Yeah.
doesn't seem
So
like utopia.
I yeah. So like I don't I agree that that isn't utopia. I think like there has to be a baseline for like human compassion, right? Like I don't think you can reach utopia where there's like a disenfranchisement of people. I I still hesitate on the notion that like it's a spiritual need or desire for these kinds of things, but like that might just be like off. Like I was trying to say before I got cut off and had to, or before my connection cut off earlier, is that like I resist a lot of this language that's used in a lot of these kinds of conversations, because it's oftentimes used to smuggle in other notions that I was not agreeing
Totally,
to, right?
totally, totally. That's why I kind of think that like, okay, like if we were locked up in empirical conversation all the time, we wouldn't have this like trust, this smuggling, this sense of like this trauma around people smuggling in ideologies. This is an ancient one. This is ingrained in us. We're very
Yeah.
perverse to dogma, which is rightfully so. And that's what I mean by
the futuristic society, I don't think would be as perverse. I think they'd be very like empathetic and open-minded. Maybe even their technology would allow them to like see through their own distortions on dogma, and that like when the Zen master says some weird and metaphorical language, you get a little translation of what it means in your words so that you can actually understand, oh, he's not talking about the stone and the water trickling, he's talking about life or death or whatever.
Hmm.
you
Yeah.
know like without that ability, though, we're lost in translation so much of the time. We can perceive someone's just mere communication as, oh, they're being superstitious or they're being dogmatic. And what I'm saying is our tools of like logic and science rely on this gratuitous notion of interpreting someone else's claims, whether they're kind of dogmatic or not. And you can test someone's dogma. If they're not if their claims aren't falsifiable, then they're not rational. But
Yeah.
nonetheless, like a Zen master speaking metaphorically can make some really valid and sound claims using whatever weird, crazy language. And if
Hmm.
you don't have the methodology to interpret it, you're gonna miss all those claims. So it seems like gratuity and humility of our own interpretation of things is the baseline of any of these functions. Like I don't know how you could program that into a computer. I don't know how an AI machine could have something like humility when the whole
Well,
notion's been programmed into it, but maybe it could.
I mean, it would at that point in time, AI would just resemble I, right? Like it wouldn't be artificial intelligence at that point in time. It's resembling genuine intelligence. Like it's not.
Exactly.
It would have to
Exactly.
be like it'd have to be it'd be nearly human, right? Or would
Yeah,
appear
yeah,
human.
I would agree. I would totally agree with that.
You mentioned it earlier, and I chuckled to myself because I've had this conversation a lot lately about nihilism and like how nothing matters. And the funny thing about the position I hold is I do hold that nothing ultimately matters, but like I'm not a nihilist, I'm an absurdist.
Yes, I've heard this. I've heard you talk about this before, which yeah, I could be on board with, really.
I
Absurdism has a bit of an optimistic tint to it, which I
It
like.
does.
So
It,
yeah.
it, it bit so like, and that's what I really really like about absurdism is like you can like if you like there's a kind of like track that a lot of like baby atheists will follow, right? Like they'll leave whatever dogmatic religion they go through, and like they'll go through a period of like anger and lashing out against the systems that they once held, and they will feel the frustration, and oftentimes that leads to nihilism. And like nihilism's it's no fun, it's no bueno, dude. Like everything sucks if you're a nihilist. Like you're like, there's no point in any of this, so like, why should I bother? But then like the way I feel about it is like I've summited the mountain of nihilism and like looked out and was like, oh wait, it doesn't matter, so let's find joy where we
It's
can find
relieving.
joy.
It's
It's
relieving to
yeah.
find out nothing matters. Yes. Yeah.
Yes, instead of it being a massive weight, it's like, oh, I don't have to carry the world on my back. I can find joy in the things that spark joy, and the things that don't need to be pressed upon or worried about. Who cares about it, right? Like, it's ultimately not. It's not problematic.
Yeah. Yeah. I do think that realization tends still towards the good, which is me being a little bit, I'm derailing a bit there, but I do think that like that relief is somewhat of an obligation. Like it would be sinful to walk around feeling the weight of the world. Like that relief of being like, oh, nothing matters. It's not necessarily nihilistic, like you're saying, because there is an element there it's an obligation. Like
Hmm.
you will not fulfill your own duties if you walk
Hmm.
around carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders,
Yeah,
taking
you'll be.
everything so seriously.
Yep, you'll be so angry. You'll be so because I was there. I knew it. Like and like I was
Yes.
so bitterly angry at the world
But
and the
but
way the world functioned, and then I was just like, wait, who cares?
how potent is the obligation? Because it's like, well, if then nothing matters, it's like, well, now you have to be so lighthearted in every debate, in every disagreement, and every time you get cut off in traffic, every time you're down on your money or you have a bill, like it's like you have to remember this. It's like it's one of the most important lessons because it's like now,
It
oh,
is.
don't contradict yourself. The next time you get upset, you remember the mountaintop. You said nothing mattered, and
So
now
like,
you're down
and
in the
here's the
valley
thing is
again.
like Yeah, but that's like the nature of it. It's like it's a useful tool when you recognize it, right? So like if you're in those moments and like it comes to you, you're like, oh wait, I can use this as a tool to leverage myself into a better situation, and like that's ultimately what I think a lot of these things are for, and like what they were developed for is like how do you find a person, or how do you find yourself in a better position that allows you to make like a more cohesive or rational decision, right? And like ultimately that's what absurdism does for me is like I can accept that nothing is ultimately like nothing ultimately hinges upon this because like this is it, and like so be it, right? It is what it is, right? But I don't have to think about that 100% of the time. Like I can have moments of seriousness and like take things like seriously and be important, right? Like there are things that I take extremely seriously, like my relationships with people. I care about those deeply, but like you know, and I don't think it would be beneficial for me to walk around and be like, these don't matter because nothing matters.
Yeah,
It's like I
like
think about all these kind of things in thought processes as like tools in the toolbox to be used and leveraged when they're most beneficial.
yeah, like absurdism is a claim to that toolbox. It's not
Hmm.
necessarily a claim about reality. Like you're claiming about your own psychology. Most of the things you think are fairly absurd. Of
Hmm.
course, if you lost your leg, that wouldn't be, you're going to take that very seriously. It's not going to be, you're going to struggle through that. That's going to be a horrible experience. Nonetheless, absurdism is more about rationalizing your own thoughts, dealing with your own thoughts a little less seriously so that you
Hmm.
can actually rationalize them.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah, it's a
But I need
key.
to hop
It's a
off
key.
here so I can actually go do some physical therapy for my shoulder. So I will talk to you later, my man.
Dude, much love, Jack. It's always a good conversation. This is great. I'm down
Always
to
good to talk
talk
to you, dude.
anytime, though. You too,
See
man.
you, man.
Peace, bro. Okay, much love, everyone. I should hop off too. This app, hey, this app, the procrastination app of life. I don't use any other app like this one. Like, I guess I fall asleep to some podcasts and stuff. Sometimes I'll watch dinner playing like on YouTube. I'll eat my meal and watch something on YouTube. But TikTok is like a all day thing. BG, I'd love to talk to you for a second. I don't know, pick your brain on something. I don't care what we talk about. No pressure though, bro. Um, I'm fascinated by a lot of different topics. Logic is my main one, but I can branch into really anything. I've heard you debate theology in a lot of different lives. If no one comes up though, I'm gonna hop off here. I've been on for a bit, but I guess one of the main things, BG, I'd like to pitch to you is the idea of like logic requiring spirituality, some sort of normative claim in science towards, oh, you ought to use logic to make your claims. I think that this is an interesting notion. The idea that like science doesn't make any normative claims yet judges everything through the lens of rationality seems to be a normative claim. Um, Love to hear your thoughts on that. Okay, y'all, I'm gonna hop off. Peace and love.